Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 1,000 likes. It only takes just a quick second to drop a like, and it helps out the channel so much. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I do post content just like this all of the time. I did want to apologize for the break in uploads between the one previous to this one and this one. I just had a lot going on. Nothing bad. It was just the holidays and then New Year's. And then I had one of my childhood best friends fly out and visit me for a week, and we were just having a ton of fun. And I kind of wanted to put making videos on the back burner and just really appreciate my time with him. So everything is good, everything is fine. I should be back in the workflow, and we have an awesome lineup of stories for you all today. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, enjoy the 2 hours of uninterrupted horror stories right after the ad break after this intro. There won't be any more ad breaks after that one. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. I was on my 3rd beer in a local bar. She must have noticed me before I noticed her, because when my eyes fell on her, she was already looking my way. There was passion in her eyes. She wore a short black dress, and her crimson hair complemented her emerald-colored eyes. A tattoo of a snake stretched across her arm. As soon as we made eye contact, I looked away. I've always been a nervous guy, and I don't want to make things awkward by staring at her. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her keeping a constant gaze on me. I pretended to be busy on my phone when the bartender put a beer in front of me. "I didn't order this," I told him. Carl was the regular bartender and gave me a little wink. "It's from the girl sitting at the bar." He walked away, and I looked at her dumbfounded, but gave a small nod to say thanks. She took this as an invitation and walked over to me. "So you finally stopped avoiding my eye contact, huh?" She took the seat right next to me and gave a playful smile. My nerves were acting up, and I felt sweat running down my back. This girl was beautiful, and she was talking to me. I decided to play it cool. "Trying to catch my eye, were you?" She looked at me as if she were expecting something more. "Can I get you a drink?" I offered. "Something strong." I called over Carl and ordered her a vodka. She didn't complain. "What's your name?" I asked. "It's Madeline." "Well, Madeline, my name is Jack. So what made you sit down next to me?" "You have inviting eyes, and I was bored," she replied. "If it wasn't for that second part of your sentence, I'd be flattered as hell." She laughed. Interesting choice of words. I didn't get the joke, but laughed anyway. "Do you live close by?" she asked. I noticed that every few minutes, she'd scooch her chair closer to mine. "Yeah, it's a 10-minute drive from here to my place." "Interesting." She took a sip of her vodka. "Want to play a game of truth or dare?" "Sure," I said, trying not to break eye contact. "You go first." "How about we make it more interesting? If you win, you get to take me home tonight and do whatever you want. If I win, I get to take you home. So what will it be? Truth or dare?" This sounded like a win-win in my opinion. My luck with girls had never been amazing. I'd been on a dry spell for over a year now, and here was my chance to take this lady home. I couldn't mess this up. "Dare." "My kind of guy," she said, giving me that flirtatious smile again. "Let's see. What to make you do? Oh, I know. You have to steal something from this bar." I looked around, trying to find an easy steal. "Okay, be right back," I told her and went to the bathroom. When I came back 2 minutes later, I showed her the roll of toilet paper I'd stolen. She laughed. Well, not exactly the great heist I was expecting, but I guess it'll do. I was starting to get tipsy. "Your turn. Truth or dare?" There was a malicious glance in her eyes. "Dare me." "Get a stranger to buy you a drink in this bar." She rolled her eyes. "At least make it a challenge." She got up, pulled up her skirt slightly and gave me a wink. Not 3 minutes later, she set down a vodka and a beer on the table. Got you something as well. Now tell me, boy, truth or dare? Okay, give me a truth, I replied. When's the last time you screwed someone? This caught me by surprise. I hesitated, wondering if I should tell her the truth or make up a wild sex story. I'm gonna be honest here. I wasn't exactly on my game this past year. She looked at me with surprise. Oh, well then. You just have to make sure that you win tonight. To be fair, I thought I was rocking this interaction, and I just thought of a dare she couldn't possibly go through with. This was going to be my victory move. Truth or dare? Dare. I took a deep breath. Okay, Madeline, take off an article of clothing. I knew she wouldn't be able to do this because she was only wearing that short black dress. She smiled. The gloves are coming off, huh? Finally. Let's play then. As she spoke, she reached under her skirt and pulled out her underwear. With a few easy movements of her legs, it was completely removed. I tried to look cool and casual, but I'm afraid I was just gaping at her. She laughed and, without saying anything, moved closer and slipped her underwear into my pocket. Truth or dare? I knew if I'd said dare, she'd pick something insane. I decided to play it safe. Truth, I blurted out. The beers were getting to my head. She looked at me. Her eyes went cold, all expression draining from her face. Do you still think about your brother a lot? My stomach turned. I went from almost drunk to stone cold sober in a second. What? What did you just say? I asked, do you still think about your brother? My heart sank. Who are you? Sweat ran down my back again, but this time it wasn't nerves. It was fear. It doesn't work that way. You have to answer, or you lose. For the first time that night, I felt genuinely scared. I thought about getting up and walking out, but something in my gut told me I needed answers. Every day, I said, trying to hide the sadness in my voice. She looked surprised, then laughed. Oh my, you really are someone special. I was sure you would have walked out after that one. I glanced around the bar. It was almost empty. The local drunk slumped in the corner, Carl chatting with a blonde, two guys murmuring at the far end. Well, don't you have anything to ask me? She said, clearly enjoying herself. Who are you? She frowned. No, that's not how this works. Second time. You get one more chance. Her eyes flashed red for a split second. Summoning all my courage, I asked, truth or dare? That's more like it. Truth. Who are you? I have been known by many names on many different planes. One of the names your people gave me was Apollyon. Others called me Abaddon, though the legends far outweigh my actions. This body isn't even mine. It belongs to someone who performed a ritual with her friends. Looking for cheap thrills, now she gets the privilege of being mine until I'm sick of her. She smiled sweetly, as if unaware of the weight of her words. I shook my head. This has to be some kind of sick joke. Truth or dare, Jack? She asked me. I chose truth. Do you believe what I'm telling you? No, this is too much to believe. Her only response was a faint smile. I felt trapped. Walking away crossed my mind, but fear kept me seated. She couldn't have known about my brother. He'd died over 7 years ago, before we moved states. Still, I kept playing. Truth or dare? Dare. Go away and leave me alone. She laughed. That's not how this works. Leaving is a forfeit, but I'll be kind and give you one more chance. We can't dare each other to go away, or to kill ourselves. Now give me a dare. Fine. Prove to me you are who you say you are. She smiled. That's I can do. She grabbed my hand and images flew through my mind. I immediately knew she wasn't human. God, the things she made me see. I stood in an unfamiliar landscape with black fire burning everywhere. There were things walking around that couldn't have been real. Giant monstrosities with 2 snake-like heads and 6 legs. Almost humanoid creatures that must have been 4 meters long, with bat-like wings on their backs. It was painful to my eyes and sanity just to look at them. An eclipse loomed high in the sky. In the far distance stood enormous mountains. At least, that's what I thought, until those damned mountains started moving. At the center of it all was a pit. Thousands upon thousands of humans and other creatures lay inside it. I was shocked to see they were still alive. The sound of their screams and muffled moans were horrible, but the most awful thing of all, when I looked at those poor damned souls in that wretched pit, I saw his eyes. He was buried beneath others, and even after 7 years, I would never forget the eyes of my own brother. Jonathan was in that pit. I don't know what came over me, but suddenly my fear of that hell-like world faded away, and I ran toward the pit. I saw his eyes widen in response. I was getting him out. I blinked once, and when I opened my eyes, I was back in the bar. Madeline was next to me. That same smile plastered on her face. "Don't make a scene, or this won't end well for the people here," she told me. My brother was stuck in hell, and this girl didn't want me to make a scene? "Get him out of there," I said, trying to sound confident and intimidating. Tears rolled down my cheeks. "Poor baby," she replied. "I know it can't be easy facing this reality." She wiped a tear from my face, and I sat there in utter shock. "God, I love that taste," she murmured, licking the tear from her finger. "I'm afraid I can't get him out. The stakes of this game have already been set." I tried to stay calm and think rationally, but that was easier said than done. The only thought going through my mind was finding something sharp and stabbing her in the face. That wouldn't help, though. I had to save my brother. "You told me if I won, I could tell you to do whatever I wanted." She chuckled. "You sweet child. The deal was that you could do whatever you wanted to me. And I really mean that. You can torture me, or take me and work out every messed up fantasy you've ever had. Hell, you can do both at the same time. Sounds like a fun night, but you can't tell me what to do." The way she said it almost sounded like sympathy. "Please," I said, no longer holding back my tears. "Get him out." "Truth or dare, Jack?" I chose dare. "Make yourself bleed." "Wait, hold on. You said we couldn't ask each other to harm ourselves." She laughed. "I said we couldn't tell each other to kill ourselves. I just want to see a little blood." I pulled out my pocket knife and held my hand under the table as I made a small cut in my finger. It hurt real bad. As soon as the blood welled up, she took my finger and licked it clean. "Do you like that?" she asked, licking the last of the blood from her lips. I didn't. "Can we just ditch the small talk and play the game?" I asked. That only seemed to excite her more as she leaned forward, eagerly waiting for the question we both knew was coming. "Truth or dare?" "Truth." "How can I get my brother out of there?" I asked, wiping away the last of my tears. She tilted her head, studying me like a sick puppy. It disgusted me. "You can't, Jack," she said. "Your brother played a game, and he lost. It's that simple. Even if you manage to return, there's not a goddamn thing you could do." Those words devastated me. I had 1,000 more questions about Jonathan and that wretched world, but this horrible game wouldn't allow them. "Truth or dare, Jack?" I picked truth. There was no way I was choosing dare again. "Would you take his place? If I gave you the option right now, Would you go to the pit to free him? A soul for a soul. It's not a bad deal, right? The question caught me completely off guard. Everyone likes to believe they'd be the hero, the martyr who wouldn't hesitate to save someone they love. I thought about my parents, my friends, my colleagues, even my online gaming buddies. Tears welled in my eyes again as I realized what I had to do. Even if it meant being trapped in that world forever, I had to try. For Jonathan. I looked at her with disgust. Okay, take me there. I'll take his place. She burst into manic laughter. Oh, my dear Johnny boy. I just wanted to know if you would. The truth is, even if I wanted to, I can't get your brother out. He's property of that world now, and its inhabitants. Never in my life had I wanted to hurt someone so badly. I knew I couldn't lose this game. I couldn't bear the thought of my parents losing another child. It would destroy them. Then something clicked. It wasn't a good plan, and I didn't even know if it would work, but it was my only chance. Truth or dare, Madeline? As expected, she chose dare. I dare you to leave the body you're possessing right now. Her eye twitched, and her smile finally vanished. Well, well, clever boy, she said. If I'm not here, I can't play the game anymore. Of course you'll miss out on your prize. Or who knows? This girl might still be into you. Let's do this again sometime. She laughed. None of this meant a damn thing to her. She was just having fun, and that infuriated me most of all. Please, I said, exhausted. Just leave me alone. In an instant, her eyes changed. Confusion flickered across her face before she collapsed. It took me a moment to call out to Carl for help. The past half hour had felt like it was just the two of us in the world. I told him I thought she'd had too much to drink. He called an ambulance and told me to go home. On the way back, I replayed everything, tears streaming down my face. When I got home, I had a drink, then another, and another. I woke to birds chirping as sunlight spilled through the window. My head felt like it might explode. Relief washed over me. It had all been a dream, until I noticed I was still wearing yesterday's clothes. I reached into my pocket for my phone, and my body went cold when my fingers brushed against a piece of underwear. I still have the playlist we made on my phone. It is mostly trash 2000s pop and some indie bands she found on TikTok. We used to drive around for hours in my beat-up Honda just listening to it. That was our thing. We would go to the drive-thru at Wendy's, get 2 Frosties, and just drive until the gas light came on. Katie was cool. She was not just my sister. She was the only person in the house who actually got it. Our parents were fine, I guess. They loved us, but they were old and tired. They were the kind of parents who fell asleep on the couch at 8 p.m. and worried about the lawn more than anything else. Katie and I were a team. When I snuck out to go to that bonfire sophomore year, she stuffed pillows under my duvet to make it look like I was sleeping. When she failed her math final, I intercepted the report card in the mail, and we burned it in the backyard fire pit. We looked out for each other. We were stuck in the same boring suburb, going to the same boring school, dealing with the same boring people. We survived by making fun of everything. We had a running commentary on the world. If we saw someone wearing a weird hat, we would look at each other and just know what the other was thinking. We didn't even have to say it. That is why what I did makes no sense. I look back at it now and I try to find a reason. I try to find some deep, dark anger or some hidden resentment. People always want a reason. The therapists I talk to now, they always dig for some childhood trauma or some sibling rivalry. They want a story where I secretly hated her. But there's nothing. It was just a random afternoon. Katie had been talking about this guy, Alex, for months. She was obsessed. She wrote his name in her notebook. She knew his schedule. She knew what car he drove. It was honestly kind of pathetic, but in a cute way. She was 16. She had never really had a boyfriend. She had this idea of romance that she got from movies. She thought Alex was this deep, mysterious soul just because he wore a leather jacket and didn't talk much in chem lab. I knew Alex. He wasn't deep. He was a stoner kid who played COD until 4 a.m. But I didn't tell her that. I let her have the fantasy. That afternoon we were sitting in the living room. She was talking about him again, wondering if he noticed her new shoes, wondering if he liked girls with curly hair. I was bored. That is the only excuse I have. I was bored, and I was scrolling on my phone. I wish I could just talk to him, she said. But I don't have his number. The idea popped into my head fully formed. It wasn't malicious. It was just something to do. A way to interrupt the boredom. I think I have his number. I lied. I think he was in a group project with me last year. Her eyes went wide. Really? Do you still have it? Let me check, I said. I didn't have his number, obviously. I opened the App Store and downloaded WhatsApp. I set up a fake account using a burner number app. I set the profile picture to a grainy shot of a guitar I found on Google Images. Alex played guitar, or at least he carried one around. I created the account. I named it Alex. Then I looked at Katie. She was staring at me, practically vibrating with hope. Yeah, I found it, I said. Give it to me, she said. No, that's weird, I said. If you text him out of the blue, he will think you are a stalker. Let me text him. I'll tell him you are cool. I will tell him to text you. She looked at me like I was a superhero. You would do that? Yeah, I said. I got you. I typed a message into the WhatsApp account. I sent it to her real number. Hey, got your number from your brother. He said you're cool. I'm Alex. My phone buzzed in my hand as I sent it. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table a second later. She picked it up. She read the screen. Then she screamed. She literally jumped up off the couch and screamed. She hugged me. She squeezed me so hard I couldn't breathe. He texted me, she squealed. He actually texted me. I should have stopped it there. I should have said, gotcha, and laughed and taken the punch to the shoulder. It would have been a funny story. We would have laughed about it at Wendy's later. But I didn't. I just smiled. It felt good to be the one making things happen. It felt good to see her so happy, even if it was fake. That's awesome, Katie, I said. What did he say? She showed me the phone. He said you told him I was cool. Well, I said. I did. The next 24 hours were a blur of texts. I was texting her from the bathroom. I was texting her from my bed. I was texting her while sitting right next to her on the couch. It was too easy. I knew exactly what she wanted to hear. I knew she liked indie music, so Alex liked indie music. I knew she wanted someone to listen to her talk about her art class, so Alex asked tons of questions about her sketches. I was catfishing my own sister, and the sick part was, I thought I was being a good brother. I thought I was giving her a confidence boost. I told myself that when I revealed the prank, she would see that she could talk to guys, that she was interesting. By Friday afternoon, she was in deep. She was walking around with a goofy smile on her face. She was humming. He wants to meet up, she told me Friday night. She was standing in my doorway. He wants to grab a burger tomorrow. I had sent that text 5 minutes ago. That's cool, I said. Are you going to go? I don't know, she said. I'm nervous. What if I say something stupid? You won't. I said. Just be yourself. He already likes you over text, right? Yeah, she said. Yeah, he does. I set the trap. I picked the diner on Main Street, the one with the neon sign that flickered. It was public. It was safe. It was the perfect stage. I can drive you, I offered, since Mom and Dad are going to that dinner thing. You are the best, she said. She went to her room to pick out clothes. I could hear her opening and closing drawers. I lay back on my bed and opened WhatsApp. Can't wait to see you. I typed. Me neither. She replied instantly. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. It was just so easy. Saturday came. The mood in the house was electric. Katie spent 2 hours in the bathroom. She borrowed Mom's perfume. She came into my room to show me her outfit. She was wearing this blue dress she bought with her babysitting money. It had little white flowers on it. She had curled her hair. She was wearing lip gloss. She looked older. She looked pretty. She didn't look like my annoying little sister. She looked like a young woman, going on her first real date. Do I look okay? She asked. She was twisting her hands together. Is it too much? Should I change? You look great, I said, and I meant it. Alex is going to flip. I hope so, she said. She took a deep breath. Okay, let's go. We got in the car. I plugged in the phone. I put on the playlist. She was singing along to everything. She was tapping her hand on the dashboard. She was glowing. I drove to the diner. I pulled into the lot across the street. Go get him, I said. She unbuckled her seatbelt. She turned to me. Thanks, she said. Seriously, thanks for talking me up to him. No problem, I said. She got out. We walked across the street. She walked with her head held high. She looked confident. I watched her walk through the glass doors. I waited 5 minutes. I wanted her to get settled. I wanted the anticipation to build. Then I pulled out my phone. I opened the camera app. I hit record. I got out of the car. I crossed the street. I was smiling. I was rehearsing what I would say. Gotcha. Look at your face. You are so gullible. I walked into the diner. The bell above the door chimed. I saw her immediately. She was sitting on the third booth. She was facing the door. She had a menu in front of her, but she wasn't reading it. She was checking her reflection in the napkin holder. She was fixing her hair. She looked up when she heard the bell. Her face lit up when she saw me. It was pure, unfiltered joy. She thought I was there to check on her, or maybe she thought I was there to say hi to Alex. Did you see him? She asked as I walked up. Is he parking? I didn't lower the phone. I zoomed in on her face. I wanted to catch the exact moment the realization hit. He's not coming, Katie, I said. She blinked. What? Is he running late? Did he text you? I shook my head. No, he didn't text me. I held up my phone. I switched from the camera app to WhatsApp. I showed her the messages. The blue bubbles. The grainy guitar picture. It was me, I said. I'm Alex. I waited for the laugh. I waited for the punchline. I waited for her to grab a French fry and throw it at me. I waited for her to say, "You ass," and roll her eyes. But she didn't. The smile didn't turn into a frown. It didn't turn into anger. It just vanished. It fell off her face like a mask slipping. She looked at the phone screen, then she looked at me, then she looked around the diner. There were a few other people there, an old couple in the corner, a trucker at the counter. No one was looking at us. No one cared. But she looked like she was naked on a stage. She shrank, physically shrank. Her shoulders hunched up. She crossed her arms over that blue dress with the white flowers. She looked like a little kid who had been told Santa was dead. Why? She whispered. It was such a quiet question. It was just a joke, I said. The camera was still recording. Smile, it's just a prank. She tried to smile. She actually tried. Her mouth twitched. It was the most heartbreaking thing I have ever seen. She didn't say anything else. She just slid out of the booth. She walked past me. She walked out the door. I followed her. Katie, come on. Don't be dramatic. She got into the car. She stared out the window. I got in the driver's side. I was annoyed now. I felt like she was ruining the bit. I felt like she was being a bad sport. It was funny, I said as I started the car. You fell for it so hard. She didn't answer. She didn't put her seatbelt on. She just stared at the passing streetlights. I drove home in silence. The playlist was still playing, but she wasn't singing anymore. When we got home, I uploaded the video. I captioned it. She actually fell for it. I tagged a few of our friends. I wanted validation. I wanted people to tell me it was funny so I didn't have to feel the weird knot forming in my stomach. Katie went straight to her room. I heard the lock click. I went to my room. I refreshed the feed. The likes were rolling in. The comments were starting. LMAO, look at her face. That is brutal. Bro, you are evil. I felt better. See? Everyone thought it was funny. It wasn't a big deal. I knocked on her door around 10 p.m. Come on, I said through the wood. Don't be a baby. Everyone thinks it's hilarious. She didn't answer. I woke up the next morning because the house was too quiet. Usually on Saturdays, Katie was up early. She would be in the kitchen making pancakes or blasting music while she cleaned her room. But there was nothing. No sound. I looked at my phone. The video had over 1,000 views. People I didn't even know were sharing it. I got up. I went to the bathroom. The door was locked. Katie? I knocked. Hurry up. I need to pee. Nothing. Katie, seriously, open the door. Silence. A heavy, pressurized silence that made my ears pop. I got a penny from my dresser. I used it to turn the lock from the outside. The door swung open. Katie was on the floor. She was curled up around the toilet. She was still wearing the blue dress. There were empty blister packs everywhere. Tylenol, Advil, my dad's old prescription painkillers for his back. The box was torn open. The foil was punched out. I laughed at first, a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Okay, I said. You got me. Good one. Get up. I nudged her leg with my foot. She didn't move. She was heavy, stiff. I knelt down. I touched her arm. It was cold. Not cool from the tile. Cold. Deep. Radiating cold. Like touching a piece of frozen meat. I grabbed her shoulder. I tried to shake her. Her head didn't flop. Her neck was rigid. Her jaw was clamped shut. Her eyes were open, staring at the porcelain of the toilet bowl. They were cloudy. I don't remember screaming, but I must have, because my mom was suddenly there. Then my dad. My mom made a sound I didn't know a human could make. It wasn't a scream. It was a raw, animal howl. She fell to her knees. She tried to pull Katie up, but the rigor mortis had set in. Katie was frozen in that curled up shape. The paramedics came. Moving her was the worst part, because she was stiff. They couldn't just put her on the stretcher. They had to maneuver her down the narrow hallway. They had to tilt her to get her through the door frame. It felt disrespectful. It felt like they were moving a mannequin, not a person. I stood at the top of the stairs and watched. I had killed my sister. I had killed her for likes. I had killed her because I was bored. The house died that day. My parents stopped speaking. They stopped eating. They moved through the rooms like ghosts, avoiding eye contact with me. They didn't blame me out loud. The police ruled it a suicide, a tragedy, an impulsive act by a teenager. But they knew, and I knew. The video was gone. I deleted it that afternoon, but it was too late. People had seen it. People knew. The funeral was 3 days later. It was an open casket. I wish it hadn't been. By then, the stiffness had passed. She looked soft. Too soft. The mortician had used too much makeup to cover the gray. Her cheeks were too pink. Her lips were a weird, waxy orange. It didn't look like Katie. It looked like a doll that someone had melted and tried to reshape. I stood by the casket and tried to cry, but I couldn't. I just felt empty. I felt like there was a hole in my chest where my heart used to be. After the funeral, the silence took over. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It felt like the air in the house was made of lead. I stopped sleeping. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing her face in the diner. I missed her. I missed the car rides. I missed the playlist. I missed my teammates. I missed the only person who understood me. I started spending my nights sitting in the hallway outside her room. I couldn't go in. I couldn't look at the empty bed, so I just sat against the wall and stared at the door. That is when the sound started. It began 3 weeks after she went into the ground. I was dozing off, my head resting on my knees. Ding. My head snapped up. It was the specific, tritone chime of a WhatsApp notification. I checked my phone. It was silent. Ding. It came from inside her room. My heart began to beat like a drum. I knew her phone was in the evidence box at the police station. I knew the room was empty, but the sound was there, clear as day. I stood up. My legs were numb. I reached for the doorknob. I opened the door. Her room smelled like dust and that cloying, floral perfume she had worn that night. The bed was made. The desk was clear. Ding. The sound wasn't coming from a device. It was coming from the corner of the room, from the shadows between the wardrobe and the wall. "Katie?" I whispered. The shadow moved. It didn't look like a ghost. It didn't look like her. It looked like a smudge on a camera lens. A blur of darkness in the shape of a person. It was taller than she was. Darker than the dark around it. It didn't speak. It just waited. I should have run. I should have woken my parents, but I was so tired. I was so full of this rotting, black guilt that I just wanted something to happen. I wanted to be punished. "Are you there?" I asked. The shadow didn't answer, but a thought appeared in my head. It wasn't my voice. It sounded flat, hollow, like wind blowing through a pipe. "Undo," it whispered. "Undo." The word echoed in my skull. It wasn't audible. It was bouncing through my own mind, a thought that was not my own. I fell to my knees on her carpet. "I want to," I sobbed. "I want to undo it. I just want things back to normal." The shadow seemed to expand. It filled the room with a cold that burned my skin. It wasn't the cold of the air conditioning. It was the same cold I had felt when I touched her arm on the bathroom floor. "Normal," the hollow voice said. "We can do normal. Open the door." "How?" I asked. "Tell me how." "The door is already open," the voice droned. "You opened it when you called for her. You just have to invite her back in." I wiped my face. I looked at the shadow. It didn't have eyes, but I could feel it watching me. It felt like something. I can't even explain what it felt like, but I didn't care. "What do I do?" "Tonight," the voice said. "Unlock the back door. Call her name. Want it." "Is it that easy?" I asked. You have to want it more than you want to be safe, the voice said. I nodded. I did. I wanted it more than anything. I spent the rest of the day in a daze. I watched my parents sit at the dinner table and push peas around their plates. They looked gray. They looked like they were waiting to die. If I brought her back, I could fix this. I could fix them. Night fell. The house went dark. I waited until I heard my parents' bedroom door close. Then, I went downstairs. I unlocked the back door. I turned off the porch light. I sat on the kitchen floor and waited. Wyatt, our golden retriever, came into the kitchen. He was a good dog, dumb as a bag of rocks, but loyal. He trotted over to me, his tail wagging. But then he stopped. He looked at the back door. His ears went back, his tail tucked between his legs. He started to whine, a high, pitiful sound. "It is okay, Wyatt," I whispered. "She's coming home." Wyatt didn't look at me. He backed away. He kept backing up until he hit the cabinets. Then he bolted into the living room. I heard his claws scrambling on the hardwood. I sat alone in the dark. Around 3 a.m. I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't a hand. It sounded hard, like bone hitting wood. I scrambled up. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the handle. I threw the door open. The backyard was pitch black. It was raining, a cold, steady drizzle. Katie was standing on the patio. She looked small. She was wearing a thick gray hoodie I recognized. It was my old one. She had the hood pulled up tight. She had a wool scarf wrapped around the lower half of her face. She was wearing gloves. She was shivering. Violent, jerking shivers that rattled her whole body. "Katie?" I whispered. She didn't look up immediately. She just stood there, vibrating in the rain. Then she stepped inside. She moved stiffly, like she was so cold her joints had locked up. She looked like a little girl who had been out in the storm for too long. "Katie, it's me," I said. I reached out to hug her. She felt solid. She felt real. But she was freezing. It was like hugging a snowman wrapped in cotton. She didn't hug me back. She just stood there, her arms pinned to her sides. "You're freezing," I said. I pulled back to look at her. The hood shadowed her eyes. The scarf covered her mouth and nose. All I could see was the bridge of her nose. The skin looked pale, but it was dark in the kitchen. "It's okay," I said, crying now. "You're home. I fixed it. I fixed it." She nodded. I led her to the living room. She walked with a weird limp, dragging her left leg a little, but I told myself it was just the cold. She sat on the couch, staring straight ahead. "I missed you so much," I said. I sat on the coffee table in front of her. "Mom and Dad are going to be so happy." She didn't answer. The house smelled funny, like wet dirt and something sweet, like old fruit. I figured it was just the mud on her clothes. "Say something," I pleaded. "Please?" She made a sound. It was muffled by the scarf. It sounded like a dry wheeze. "Hungry," she whispered. My heart broke. She sounded so weak. "Hungry? Okay. I'll get you something. I will make you whatever you want." I ran to the kitchen. I was manic with relief. She was here. She was talking. It worked. I pulled out ham, cheese, bread. I started making a sandwich. I was humming. I was actually humming. Then I realized something. It was quiet. Wyatt usually came running when he heard the cheese wrapper. He was obsessed with cheese. "Wyatt," I called out. "Come here, boy." Nothing. I finished the sandwich. I put it on a plate. Wyatt, I whistled. Silence. A cold feeling started in my stomach. Not the good cold of relief, the bad cold of fear. I walked into the kitchen. Wyatt? The door to the basement was cracked open. Wyatt wasn't allowed in the basement. I walked over. I pushed the door open. Wyatt, get out of there. I turned on the light. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a heap of golden fur. It wasn't moving. I walked down the stairs. My legs felt heavy. Wyatt? I got to the bottom step. It was Wyatt, but he was... Something wasn't right. He was torn open. His stomach was gone. His ribs were cracked open like a wishbone. There was blood everywhere. It was pooled on the concrete. It wasn't an accident. Something had done this. Something strong. I heard a creak on the stairs behind me. I spun around. Katie was standing at the top of the stairs. The hood was down. The scarf was gone. Her face was gray. Her jaw was hanging loose, unhinged on one side. Her mouth was stained red, with blood. She was holding the sandwich I made her. She crushed it in her gloved hand and let it drop to the floor. Still hungry, she rasped. I backed up until I hit the washing machine. Katie? I choked out. She walked down the stairs. She didn't walk like a person anymore. She moved like a spider, her limbs jerking and snapping into place. She stopped at the bottom. She looked at the dead dog. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were milky white and sunken in. You did this? I whispered. She tilted her head. Her neck cracked. Empty, she said. Her voice was wet now. So empty. What are you? I screamed. Your sister, she said, but the way that she said it was wrong. It was like she was mimicking a recording. You wanted me back. Not like this, I said. I didn't want this. She took a step towards me. You owe me, she hissed. It wasn't a threat, it was a plea. She looked at me and for a second, the milky film over her eyes seemed to thin. I saw brown underneath. I saw panic. It hurts, she whined. She sounded like a little kid. It hurts so much. I'm so hungry. I'm so angry. How? I asked, trembling. What do you need? The shadow peeled itself off the basement wall. It stood next to her, tall and jagged. She needs the source, the voice droned. She is running on fumes. She needs the fuel that burned her out. Me? I asked. Katie nodded. She reached out a hand. The glove had fallen off. Her fingers were gray and withered. Please, she whispered. Let me eat. Then I will be whole. Then I will be Katie again. I looked at her. I looked at the dog. If you eat me, I said, you will kill me. Yes, she said. Exchange. A life for a life. You took mine. Give it back. She stepped closer. I could smell death on her breath. I can't be like this, she cried. It's cold. It's dark. Please, brother. Help me. She was using my guilt. She was reaching right into my chest and squeezing my heart. She knew exactly what to say. If I let you, I said, will you remember? She paused. She licked the blood off her lip. Yes. I looked at her. Really looked at her. If I let her eat me, I wasn't saving her. I was cursing her. I was forcing her to live with the memory of tearing her brother apart. I was turning her into a monster forever, just so I didn't have to feel bad anymore. No, I said. Her face twisted. The sadness vanished. The hunger snapped back into place. Give it to me, she shrieked. She lunged. She hit me hard. We fell onto the concrete floor. She was strong, unnaturally strong. Her hands pinned my shoulders, her jaw unhinged even further. Her mouth was a cavern of red teeth. She snapped at my face. I turned my head. Her teeth clicked inches from my ear. Katie, stop! I yelled. Look at me. She drew back to strike again. I'm sorry, I screamed. I'm sorry I wasn't a better brother. She froze. She hovered over me, dripping saliva onto my shirt. She looked down at me. The hunger flickered. The brown eyes came back. She looked at where her hands were pinning me down. She looked at the dead dog in the corner. She realized what she was. She rolled off me. She scrambled into the corner away from me. She curled into a ball, hiding her face. Make it stop, she sobbed. Please make it stop. The shadow hissed. Do not listen to her. Feed her. No, I said. I stood up. I looked around. My dad's old tool bench was next to the dryer. I grabbed a long screwdriver. It was rusty, but the tip was sharp. I walked over to Katie. She looked up. She saw the screwdriver. She didn't run. She didn't fight. She uncurled her legs. She opened her arms. She exposed her chest. Do it, she wheezed. I fell to my knees in front of her. The smell of rot and dog blood was overwhelming. I love you, I said. I tried. I really tried. I whimpered out with tears rolling down my cheeks. I know, she whispered. Her voice was clear. No rasp, no hunger, just Katie. It is okay. I put the tip of the screwdriver against her chest. I pushed. It was hard. Her skin was like leather. I had to use both hands. I had to put my weight into it. She gasped. Her back arched. Her hands grabbed my arms, but she didn't push me away. She pulled me closer. Thank you, she breathed. Then she went heavy. The tension left her body. She slumped against me. The shadow screamed. It was a sound like a siren dying. Then the basement light flickered, and the room was empty. I sat there on the cold concrete, holding my sister's body, waiting for the sirens. That was 3 years ago. I spent 2 of those years in a state facility. The doctors called it a psychotic break. They said I dug her up to say goodbye. They said I killed Wyatt because I couldn't tell the difference between life and death anymore. I let them believe it. I took the pills. I nodded when they talked about processing grief. It was easier than trying to explain the shadow man in the basement. I've been out for over a year now. I live in a different state. I have a job stocking shelves at a grocery store on the night shift. It's quiet. I like the quiet. My parents don't talk to me. I don't blame them. To them, I'm just the monster who dug up their daughter. I'm writing this because I need to ask a question. I need to know if I'm the only one. That shadow? I don't know what it was. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't Katie. It was just something bad. It didn't leave because I won. I didn't win anything. It left because the show was over. It got what it wanted. It wanted to see how far I would go. But where did it go? I look at people now. I see the tired lady buying frozen dinners at 3 a.m. I see the guy sitting in his car in the parking lot, just staring at the steering wheel. Everyone has something they regret. Everyone has a moment they want to undo. I wonder if it's watching them too. I wonder if it's standing in the corner of your room right now, waiting for you to get desperate enough to open the door. If you are reading this, and you have a heavy heart, if you hear a voice that sounds like your own thoughts offering you a way to fix things, don't listen. Just live with the guilt. It sucks, and it's heavy, but at least it's yours. At least it doesn't eat you. After 36 years of living in an apartment complex, I can confidently attest that a night owl is worst kind of neighbor. Being as lucky as I am, I had one of those moving into the apartment right above mine at the start of October. It was a lady who seemed to have an endless supply of worldly goods that all needed to be put into place the moment she moved in. Every single evening, at 9 p.m. exactly, she would start either hammering away, drilling the walls, or pushing furniture across her floor, always managing to reach the noise level of an angry bull in heat. I have always had quite sensitive ears. I am no stranger to being awake at night because of bothersome noises. There is always noise in the city, whether from drunkards singing at the top of their lungs or nocturnal critters running amok in the streets. Trust me, the sheer number of times I've been woken up by a possum knocking over a trash can outside my window is ridiculous. The thing is, these disturbances would always be occasional and brief. Whenever they occurred, I could easily fall back asleep afterwards. But ever since the day that lady moved in, the night has been filled with constant sounds of her mayhem. The cacophony upstairs would go on every evening for about 3 to 4 days in a row. Then, at some point, I would hear a large thudding sound, indicating that she had brought out yet another box full of stuff that needed to be set up. This routine sent me into a hellish cycle of exhaustion. I would fall asleep late and wake up exhausted in the morning. I would then have to drown myself in coffee and go to work, hoping that I could get some sleep later in the evening. Don't tell me that I just should have confronted her. I didn't want her to think that I was just some cranky old man. Besides, I don't like confronting people. I have always felt awful whenever I've had to reprimand someone. I also didn't know her name, which I felt would have made the interaction even more unbearable. I just sat on my couch, waiting for the commotion to stop. Suddenly, 3 weeks had passed, and she showed no signs of being finished unpacking. The seeds of chaos were planted as the clock struck 9 p.m. on an unusually hot evening late into October. An evening so hot that I had to have my windows open to be comfortable. The lady upstairs started toiling away, following her usual schedule. It was just as loud as all the other days. I twisted and turned in my bed, trying to cover my ears with my pillow as I had done so many nights before. But this night was different. The heat mixed with my drowsiness and the sounds from upstairs all compiled into a thundering migraine. It felt as if my brain was swelling, trying to crack my head open and run away to escape the noise. I couldn't take it any longer. I sat up in my bed, inhaled all the air that could fit into my lungs and yelled, "Quiet!" My yelling was followed by a large thud from upstairs. She had just started unpacking another box. I thought to myself, I couldn't believe it. She had to have heard me. My yelling was so loud that they probably heard me all the way up on the 5th floor. I stared at the ceiling, awaiting the sounds of the troublemaker and her orchestra from hell. I waited, and then I waited some more. More time passed, but there were no more sounds coming from upstairs. Maybe she did hear me. Maybe she was finally being respectful. I felt my headache subside as I lay back down. I closed my eyes, letting my fatigue carry me towards slumber. I was completely unbothered for the first night in a long time. I rose with the sun several hours later, and I didn't have to chug half a liter of coffee to stay awake. I went to work with a smile on my face and a good feeling in my body. Everything was easier. I was happier. It was paradise compared to before. I came home that evening, hoping that the night before wasn't an exception. If only I had been that lucky. After the sun had gone down, there was activity in the upstairs apartment again. This time, though, the sounds were a bit different. All I could hear was bump, 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 repeating over and over again. I couldn't place the sound. It didn't come from any tool that I knew of. I was sure of that. There were irregular pauses between the sounds, ranging from about 5 seconds to 10 seconds. It wasn't just heavy footsteps, that was for sure. The spaces between them were too big. It wasn't a hammer either. The sounds were much too quiet for that. This thought process continued as I lay in my bed that night, my weary eyes fixated on the ceiling. Maybe she's tapping her foot on the floor to a song. But the sounds are not rhythmical in the slightest. Maybe she's dropping a ball repeatedly. But why would she even do that? Is she a juggler? No, that'd be ridiculous. These were but some of the thoughts rushing through my head as the sounds kept resonating in the background. It was beyond the midnight hours before I fell asleep that night. When I woke up in the morning, the noises had stopped. I assumed that she had just started working on her apartment again. Throughout the whole day, at my work and when I went home, I silently prayed that I wouldn't hear those sounds from her apartment again. Even though they were less noisy than normal, there was something about not being able to identify them that just made them much more annoying. To my dismay, however, the noises had begun anew by the rising of the moon. Bump, bump, bump. Lying in my bed that night, I was gritting my teeth out of sheer annoyance. I covered my head with my pillow again, but it was no use. I could still hear the sounds no matter how much I tried to keep them out. They made me feel as if someone was constantly poking at my brain, molding it like a piece of clay. Maybe it was revenge. Maybe, just maybe, she was mad about my yelling and was doing this to get back at me. Maybe she just wanted to drive me nuts with her antics. I tried to fall asleep, but it wasn't happening. The sounds from upstairs echoed in my head, much louder than any of the sounds that had been there in the weeks before. It was pure agony. My heart skipped a beat as my phone started ringing. I cautiously picked it up, wondering who was calling in the middle of the night. "Hello?" I mumbled. "Peterson, where are you, man? We've been waiting for you for like 45 minutes. "Oh, hello, sir. I'm sorry, but my shift doesn't start till..." I looked towards my window. The rays of sunlight had already broken through and cast light onto my floor. Sorry, sir. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I said as I got out of bed and hung up the phone. What followed was one of the worst days I've ever had in my life. I was a walking corpse, with only one thing on my mind. What were those sounds? I eventually got home and I didn't care about relaxing. Relaxation wasn't even on my mind. All I wanted to do, and all I did, was await the sounds. I sat on my couch, staring at the ceiling, and like clockwork, the commotion started back up late into the evening. Bump, bump, bump. I couldn't take it another night. It was torture. I didn't care what she thought of me anymore. I didn't care about having to scold her. I stormed out the door and up the stairs and pounded on the door. "What is your problem?" The sound stopped, but I wasn't satisfied. They were going to start again. I wasn't fooled. I turned the door handle and walked inside. Her apartment was cold like night and as silent as a library. I walked into the living room, and that's where I found her. She was lying on her back at the foot of a small stepladder. She lay beside the corner of a wooden table. The corner was covered in a mixture of dried brown blood and long black hairs. On the side of her head was a crater of blood, hair, skull fragments, and brain matter. Both of her arms were mangled to the bone. A swarm of flies was nesting on her body. The windows in the living room stood open, taking in the autumn breeze and wafting away any smell of rot that should have been. As I stood there taking it all in, I heard some skittering. I I stared in disbelief as a chubby little form crept out from one of the moving crates on the floor, where it had likely been hiding from all the noise I had made. It was a possum, currently unaware of my presence. It crawled over to the body and started gnawing at her hand. Every time the possum ripped off a piece of flesh, the hand was lifted into the air before subsequently dropping to the floor, producing a light bump. I know how this sounds, but I swear I had a reason. Every once in a while, when my roommate Connor wasn't home, I'd check his room. I didn't do this to steal anything or be a snoop for the sake of it. No, I wanted to reassure myself that I wasn't living with someone who'd eventually end up on the news. Connor isn't a regular guy. He's a little too proud of his German heritage, if you know what I mean. The kind of pride that sneaks into places where it doesn't belong. Nazi jokes that land wrong. World War II facts nobody asked for. He says them casually, like he's just sharing trivia. But he always watches your face afterward, always checking for judgment. To make matters worse, he's obsessed with guns and knives. He collects them, displays them, lines them up on his wall like achievements. There's a twisted dagger mounted above his TV that he once called a real beauty, and I remember wondering why anyone would need something shaped like that unless they'd spent time imagining what it would feel like to use it. His room puts out bad vibes beyond just the murder weapons. Between morbid heavy metal posters for bands no one has heard of, and the 2 movie posters he has up, American Psycho and Joker, by the way, there were lots and lots of old war memorabilia that seems to always happen to be German. No old US Army helmets or Red Army Ushankas. He only had the stuff his favorites used. That included a World War II gas mask hanging on the wall, stiff and yellowed from prior use. He loved that thing and would wear it at night to freak me out. So yeah, I consider it my civic duty to search his room from time to time. Not because I'm nosy, because when someone surrounds themselves with weapons, Nazi iconography, and incel stuff, you start wondering if they're ever going to act out one of their special interests. I sat at his desk and logged into his computer. His password was his favorite movie plus the same numbers he used for everything. The numbers 12, 13, and 14. No idea the meaning behind those, but he uses them for everything. Usernames, gamer tags, passcodes. His overuse of them made guessing his password a lot easier, that's for sure. The browser that opened upon logging in wasn't Chrome. It was a Tor browser. Connor loved talking about the deep web or the dark web. Always said it with a grin, like he knew something about it everyone else didn't. At first, it almost felt stupid. Drugs, weapons, things so blatant they felt fake. I even laughed at one site offering hired killers like it was an online food menu. It seemed my fears of Connor were unfounded. He was just using the dark web to cosplay being a criminal. None of this was real. I was about to get off when I noticed a message pop up on Connor's computer through the open door. A chat app I didn't recognize. The sender's name was just a single letter. X. Curiosity won. It always does. The messages assumed I was Connor. X joked with him about always working during the matinees. X even mocked him for being sloppy and not using his ghost. Whatever the hell that meant. When I replied pretending to be sick and home from work, the response came almost instantly. They sent a link. They called it a red room. I knew what that was, but I told myself it wasn't real. The FBI says they aren't, so I clicked anyway. The screen went dark, then bright red, like a theater curtain pulling back. The chat exploded with emojis, popcorn, eyes, smiley faces. It was like a demented Twitch chat. Then the stream started. There was a young woman on screen tied up and terrified. The first bid was for her to get one of her fingers cut off and fed to her. I laughed at first. I actually laughed, thinking it was all BS. But then a man in a hockey mask stepped into frame with a knife not all that dissimilar to the ones Connor had hanging on his wall. The man in the hockey mask cut her finger off like it was a piece of meat at the deli. As she screamed, he shoved it down her throat and she vomited it back out. So he tried to feed it to her again, but this time she kept her mouth shut. So he grabbed her by the nose and squeezed until it started gushing blood. That got her to scream again, and after 3 of the worst minutes of my life, the man in the hockey mask got her to eat the finger. I won't repeat the other bids. I won't repeat what people were asking to be done to her, or how casually they typed it. I just remember realizing, in a cold, quiet moment, that Connor had more points saved up than I'd seen spent so far, and people were spending a lot. I muted the audio and nearly threw up. I ran to my laptop and considered calling the police, but I doubted that would be any good. They'd think I was making this up. So instead I tried reporting the site through the FBI's cybercrimes division. When I went back to Connor's room to grab the pertinent site information, a private message popped up. "I wouldn't do that," X said. I tried to ignore it until X added, "Ed." That's my name. I considered what to do next. How could X know it was me and not Connor? How does he even know who I am? Did Connor tell them about me? "Do what?" I replied, curiosity getting the better of me. "Report the site like you're trying to do right now. It won't work, Ed." "Why not?" I replied again, taking pictures of the conversation with my phone. "Nice try. I'm in your phone, too." X replied, not in the chat this time, but through my phone's messenger app. "You still can't stop me," I texted them back, hoping that taunting them would get them to overplay their hand. That's when X replied back with my full name, home address, credit card number, and the names and addresses of my parents and sister. X told me the site would be gone before anyone found it, that I'd sound crazy. Then they said something worse. "You don't want to be in the next show, do you?" They told me to place a bid. Not to save her, but to participate and implicate myself too. "All you gotta do is have him cut her. That's all," X explained. When I put in the bid, my hands were shaking so badly I almost missed the enter key. I didn't even look at the number afterward. I just stared at the screen, waiting for something to stop me. An error, a disconnect, anything. The chat froze. Then it exploded. Question marks, laughing faces, people typing things like, "What?" and "Is this a joke?" Someone accused me of wasting points. Someone else said it was boring. I felt this thin, stupid flicker of hope rise in my chest. Like maybe confusion was enough. Like maybe nonsense could derail this death machine. On the stream, the man in the hockey mask tilted his head. He looked genuinely curious. He set the knife down. I didn't breathe until I saw his hand come back into frame holding an electric razor. The sound was what broke me. That low, mechanical buzz cutting through the silence. The girl started crying immediately like she already knew what was coming. Like humiliation hurt almost as much as everything else. She tried to turn her head away, but she couldn't go anywhere. Hair fell into her lap in uneven clumps. The chat went quiet again. Not angry this time. Watching. I felt sick, but I also felt something worse. Relief. A coward's relief. I told myself I'd done something, that I'd changed the outcome, that this was better. Then the applause started. Clapping emojis. Fire. People calling it bold. Avant-garde. Someone typed that it was poetic. That stripping her identity was more interesting than hurting her body. I wanted to scream at them that they were all insane, that this wasn't art. that this wasn't even mercy. It was a thin attempt to appease X without it weighing too heavy on my conscience. A private message popped up. Well done. Before I could even process that, another bid appeared. Bigger than mine. Bigger than anything I'd seen all night. The man in the mask stepped back so the camera could see her clearly. Her ruined hair, her shaking shoulders, her empty, exhausted eyes. He grabbed a machete. I knew what was coming before it happened. I muted the audio, but it didn't help. Her now exposed scalp erupted red as she was cleaved to death with the machete. I think somewhere between the 5th and 6th swing, she died. At least, I hope she did. When he was done, the man in the hockey mask left the machete in her skull, much to the sick delight of the chat. The stream ended shortly after. I cried until my chest hurt. I prayed that that was the end. The horrible, sickening end. It wasn't. X messaged me again. Said I had one more task to complete to prove they could trust me. Said unlike the last one, it would be fun. When I read X's final task, I couldn't help but look up from the computer screen and towards Connor's wall. The gas mask and the knife were both staring back at me. You know what to do, X said. That night, Connor came home like nothing was wrong. Headphones on, heavy metal music blasting. He barely looked at me as I watched TV in the living room. Later, from my room, I heard him settle in. The familiar clicks of his keyboard, the same browser opening, the hum of his music still blasting in his ears. Another message arrived for him. I saw it reflected faintly off the window as I stood behind his door. Ready for the show? It was from X. I picked up the knife on the wall behind Connor as he typed his response. Always, Connor replied. When the stream loaded, Connor didn't understand. He saw on the screen his own face, confused. Then as he came to realize what was going on, afraid, very, very afraid, a message popped up. Great, because tonight you're the star. X's message caused Connor to rip out his earphones and turn around to see me standing right behind him. I was wearing the gas mask, holding his favorite knife, that he loved to imply was used on Holocaust victims. I won't lie to you all. X was right. I did have fun. I am writing this from a hospital waiting room with my hands wrapped like I tried to catch barbed wire on instinct. I went camping last weekend at a state park outside my town. That is what the reservation email said. Loop C. I still have the receipt. It is smeared from rain and sweat, but I can read enough of it. State park, camping fee, 1 night, vehicle fee, total $35. A reservation ID that means nothing to anyone except me. I am not asking you to believe in the paranormal. Something mechanical happened to me out there. Something you can buy, carry in a tote, and switch on. I camp alone a lot. I do it in the boring way. I tell my sister where I am. I park nose out. I lock food up. I do not hike off trail at night. I do not drink. I do not go looking for trouble. This time, I wanted one quiet night and a morning coffee that tastes like smoke. I got there around 4:40 p.m. The ranger in the booth tore my printed slip and gave me the usual talk about quiet hours and not leaving coolers unattended. The entrance sign had a changeable letterboard under it. Fire danger was moderate. No moving firewood. Quiet hours 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The park was half full. Families in big SUVs, a couple with a rooftop tent, a group of teenagers arguing over a Bluetooth speaker that kept cutting out when they walked too far away from it. Loop C sat deeper in the pines. The road was dirt and washboarded. My spot was on the outer edge. Not the best view, but private. picnic table, fire ring, one of those steel bear boxes bolted into a slab of concrete, the kind that squeals when you open it. The first thing that felt off was the posts. There were 4 skinny fiberglass stakes around my site, about waist height, with bright orange reflective tape on the tops, like survey markers. They were spaced in a loose square that didn't match a normal campsite boundary. Each stake had a black zip tie near the top, cinched tight around nothing. I stood there longer than I want to admit, staring at them with my hands on my hips like that would solve anything. I told myself it was maintenance, hazard tree marking, utility work, something. I set up my tent, a little 2-person backpacking tent. I parked nose out. I put my cooler in the bear box. Here is the stupid human mistake I keep replaying. I did not latch the bear box the first time. I closed it. I heard the heavy door thunk. I walked away thinking it was secure. 10 minutes later I walked back and realized the latch was still open by half an inch, the way it sits when you do not pull it down and lock it. I muttered at myself, fixed it, and moved on. Around 6:10 I walked to the restroom building to wash up. The building was painted that tired park bathroom green, and it smelled like damp concrete and lemon cleaner that never quite wins. On the way back, I passed a bigger site, where a dad was pounding stakes into the ground with the flat side of a hatchet. He nodded at me and said the bugs were insane. I agreed, even though I hadn't noticed bugs yet. He looked past me toward my site and squinted like he was trying to read something in the dark. "What are those poles?" he asked. "Already here," I said. "Probably maintenance." He made a face like he didn't love that answer, then went back to his tent. I made a small fire, not a big one, just enough to feel like I earned being outside. I ate a pouch dinner and sat on the bench with my headlamp around my neck, listening to the campground noise thin out. A baby cried somewhere down the loop. Someone laughed too loud and got shushed. A car door slammed, then it got quiet in that way campgrounds do, where you still hear people, but it comes in little distant pieces. At 9:58, my phone flipped from 5G to SOS. I remember because I looked at it before crawling into my sleeping bag. I texted my sister. "All good. Night." It failed to send. Not surprising. Lots of parks have dead spots. I fell asleep with my keys in my hand. That is another thing I normally never do. I always put them in the same pocket. This time I was half asleep and I set them on the picnic table when I tightened my tent guy lines. Then forgot to pick them back up. I did not realize that until later, when it mattered. I slept for maybe 2 hours. I woke up because my tent moved. Not a gentle flutter of wind. A hard tug, like someone grabbed the rain fly and yanked. My first thought was an animal brushing past. Then the tent moved again, lower, like pressure at ankle height. I sat up fast, my elbow hit the tent wall, my heart went straight to my throat. I listened. No footsteps, no snorting, just a faint sound outside that didn't belong. A tiny clicking, steady, like a cheap plastic pen being pressed over and over. Click, click, click. I found my headlamp and turned it on, pointing it at the tent wall. The nylon glowed, shadows moved wrong. Thin lines crossed the fabric. Not like branches, not like the normal wavering shapes you see when a light hits canvas. I pushed the door zipper open just enough to look out. The beam hit the orange tape on the nearest stake and flashed bright. Behind it, in the dark, something caught the light in sharp little glints. Clear line, fishing line, monofilament. Dozens of strands stretched between the stakes, some at shin height, some at waist height, some higher. A web that had not been there when I went to sleep. And it was moving, not swaying, pulling, tightening. The clicking got faster. A line snapped tight across the front of my tent door and the nylon creased around it like it was being cinched. The tent shifted an inch, then another. I crawled out on my hands and knees because standing felt like begging to get clotheslined. The headlamp made the lines sparkle for half a second, then they vanished again unless the beam hit them at the right angle. A line caught my wrist. It did not wrap gently, it bit. Pain so clean, it felt hot. It dug into skin like a wire saw. I yanked back on instinct, and the line tightened, dragging my hand forward toward the nearest stake. My headlamp bounced. The beam flashed over the ground, and I saw where the lines were anchored. Small black boxes at the base of trees, each about the size of a brick. Each had a spool and a little metal wheel like a tiny winch. The clicking was coming from these boxes. They were pulling the line in. A second line snapped up and caught two of my fingers together. My hand cramped instantly. I felt my pulse banging against plastic and pressure. I went for my pocket knife, got it open, brought it down on the line at my wrist. It did not cut right away. The line stretched. The blade skated. Then it finally nicked through. The moment it broke, the free end snapped back and whipped my knuckles. I rolled, trying to get clear. A line tightened under my armpit. Another caught my ankle, and my foot slid toward the stake like the ground had turned slick. I started yelling, loudly, ugly. I screamed for help until my throat burned. No one came running. Either nobody heard, or nobody wanted to charge into a campsite full of invisible line. Then I heard something new, not clicking, a soft electronic chirp, like a key fob, followed by a longer tone. One of the winch boxes changed pitch. It went from click to a smooth high whine for half a second. The line on my wrist tightened again, and I understood what it was doing. This wasn't just a web. It was a net that was closing around me. I crawled toward the nearest box, cutting lines as I went. Each cut line snapped back, stinging, sometimes catching my clothes. The knife handle got slick with blood. My wrist burned in a clean groove where the line had opened it. I reached the nearest box. It was strapped to the trunk with a ratchet strap. A thick battery pack sat beside it, wired in. On top was a small antenna, like a cheap handheld radio. The line ran through a metal guide and onto a spool. I drove the knife down and cut as close to the spool as I could. The motor protested. The line went slack for a breath. Then the spool reversed and yanked the slack back. The line tightened around my calf again, harder like the system corrected itself. Something in the trees flashed to my left. A red dot, low, moving. My headlamp caught a shape behind a trunk. Someone using the trees. Keeping distance. A hand raised. I saw the rectangle of a phone or a remote. The red dot moved again and settled on my torso, steady like it was aimed on purpose. My stomach turned cold, not because of the dot, because of what it meant. This was for me. I grabbed the battery cable and ripped it out of the box. The clicking stopped. The line around my leg went slack so suddenly I almost fell backward. For half a second it was quiet, except for my breathing and the soft snap of the fire dying down in the ring. Then another clicking started farther away. Another box. Back up. The lines began tightening again, slower but still tightening. The person in the trees shifted, leaves crushed under a careful step. I did not wait. I crawled out of the tightening tent, cutting and dragging, getting snagged, freeing myself in inches. My shorts tore. My skin caught line and I felt it burn new grooves across my thigh and forearm. My headlamp bounced, turning the trees into quick flashes. I got to my car and reached for my keys. Nothing. My pocket was empty. My brain did this blank, stupid pause, like it tried to deny reality for a second. Then it hit me. Picnic table. The clicking sped up again. The net tightened again. I could feel it starting to catch my waist. I turned my headlamp toward the picnic table and saw them glinting there like a cruel joke. Right where I left them. I crawled to the table, grabbed them, and my wrist screamed when the line shifted against the cut. I got back to the car, hit on lock, and yanked the door open. A line snapped tight across my waist as I tried to get in. It caught on my belt and pulled me back hard enough that my head clipped the door frame. I screamed and cut at it. The knife finally sliced through. The tension snapped back into the trees. I fell into the seat, slammed the door, and locked it. Lines slapped the outside of the car. I heard them ping against the metal like cables flicking a drum. In my headlamp beam, I saw the stakes again, and my stomach dropped even more. There were more than 4 extra stakes beyond the campsite boundary, closer to the road, hidden in brush. The web reached toward the road like it expected me to run. I started the car and threw it into reverse. The tires spun on dirt. The car lurched and I felt a jolt. Then I hit something soft but strong. The hood dipped. The line stretched. For a second I thought the car would be held in place. Then the line snapped. The sound was sharp, multiplied, whip cracks. The hood shook. Something slapped the windshield and left a wet streak. I reversed hard and swung forward, aiming for the main road out of the loop. In my mirror, between trunks, I saw the person move. A silhouette, closer now. Reflective tape on their sleeves, orange like the stakes. They stepped toward my car and raised a hand. Not waving, pointing. My headlights swept the ground and for a second I saw what they'd been standing near. A plastic tote half buried in needles. Lid cracked open, full of coiled clear line and more black boxes. Supplies. I hit the gas. On the way out, I laid on the horn until it sounded wrong. I wanted lights to come on. I wanted witnesses. Some did. Porch lights snapped on. A man stepped onto the road in socks, hands up like he did not know whether to stop me or ask what was wrong. I did not stop. I drove straight to the entrance booth. It was closed, dark, but there was an empty phone box by the gate. A small sign above it said to lift the receiver for emergencies and not to use it for reservations. My hands shook so badly I dropped the receiver once. I told the dispatcher someone had set wire traps in my campsite, and there were motors pulling them tight. I kept saying wire because fishing line sounded too stupid for what it had done. A sheriff's deputy arrived first, then a ranger in a separate vehicle. They took one look at my wrists and legs and told me to sit. They drove back to Loop C with lights on. I didn't go with them. I couldn't make myself. I sat under a buzzing light and watched moths slam into the plastic cover while my blood dripped onto the concrete. I remember thinking very clearly that the drip was too slow to be real, like my brain was watching it in someone else's body. When the ranger came back, his face looked different, like he'd aged 10 years on the drive. He did not tell me it was nothing. He did not tell me I imagined it. He said, "We found it." They found the stakes. They found the lines. They found multiple winch boxes, still strapped to trees, still working, still pulling the line, even after I'd ripped one battery loose. They found the tote. They did not find the person. At the hospital, they irrigated the cuts. They picked clear fragments out of my skin with tweezers. They gave me a tetanus shot. The doctor asked if I'd been attacked. I told him yes. He asked by what. I told him, a system. 2 days later I drove past that state park on my way to work just to prove to myself it existed. The sign is still there. The entrance still looks friendly. The little tourist board still advertises it like a peaceful place to unwind. Loop C is closed now. There is now signage zip-tied to the permanent posts. Bright yellow, temporary. It says the area is closed due to utility work and not to enter Loop C. If I ever camp again and see skinny fiberglass stakes with reflective tape that do not make sense or zip ties around nothing, I won't assume it is maintenance. I won't sleep in that site. I won't step between those posts. And if I hear clicking in the dark that doesn't sound like an animal, I'm leaving. I'm doing it before the lines start moving. Because once they start pulling, you stop being a camper. You become a problem somebody planned to solve. My grandfather died in our house on a winter night, and something came for him before the body was cold. We were all there when it happened. My wife, Margaret, my mother, my aunts and cousins. My grandmother sat beside him on the small cot, her hands folded in her lap, as if waiting for instructions. She had always done that. Waited. Even when he was angry. Especially then. He had been a large man once, broad, loud, impossible to disobey. In our house, his word was scripture. He had forbidden doctors, medicine, even prayers not spoken the proper way. When his breathing turned shallow and wet, no one argued. We were raised not to. The room changed long before he stopped breathing. Heavy, as if the walls were leaning in to listen. The fire burned hot, snapping and hissing. Outside, the fields were dark and pressed close to the windows. The house creaked and shifted with the wind, settling around us like a living thing. My grandmother never looked up. When he spoke his last words, they weren't blessings. They weren't apologies. He called her guilty. The clock struck once after that, though no hour was due. I remember it because it made my skin crawl. The sound lingered too long, like it didn't want to fade. My grandmother finally broke the silence. "He drove me to it," she said, her voice low and cracked. "Would he have spared an old woman? You know he wouldn't have. You've all seen what he did when anger took him. I stood between him and you, every time." No one answered her. We didn't need to. We knew what she meant. We had known for years. He had fallen down the stairs earlier that evening. Hard. The sound of bone on wood still rang in my ears, and my grandmother stood at the top of the stairs, her hand over her mouth, staring down at him with a look of horror I will never forget. Margaret gripped my arm. "Edward," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "Is something wrong with the clock?" I looked at it and felt a chill crawl up my spine. The glass reflected my face, pale, like I wasn't fully there. "I think we should step outside," I told her. "Just for air." My grandmother shook her head when I asked her to come with us. "Not yet," she said. "Let me sit with him a little longer." Margaret and I stepped out onto the porch. The cold slapped at us. Our breath came out in white clouds, and she clung to me as if she might float away. "Promise me something," she said. "Promise you won't become like him." "I won't," I told her, and I meant it. I swear. When we went back inside, the fire surged as if fed fresh wood, though no one had touched it. The room had gone quiet. Even the sobbing stopped. That was when I heard the sound. At first, it was distant, like an animal crying across the fields. Then it sharpened, stretched, became something else entirely, a scream that didn't belong to the living. It passed through the walls, through the fire, through us. My grandmother gasped and collapsed against the cot. My grandfather lay still beneath the blanket, his face finally peaceful. Then the footsteps began. They weren't footsteps exactly. It sounded as if the house itself were shifting, like weight pressing down from above. The air grew so cold it pinned us in place. I leaned down and whispered into Margaret's hair, "Whatever happens, don't look." She nodded, burying her face against my chest. The fire dimmed and something entered the room. I didn't see it. I swear I didn't. But I heard it breathe, a deep, hollow sound. Air dragged through broken reeds. Pain flared behind my eyes. My teeth ached. My bones felt too tight inside my skin. Then it spoke. The voice came from everywhere at once. "Who among you has been named?" No one answered. "Who has stolen from me?" My grandmother wailed. "I did," she cried. "Please, I stole from you." There was a long pause. The pressure in the room became unbearable. "You are the accused?" "Yes," she sobbed. The wind roared through the house, and the world dropped away beneath my feet. I held Margaret as tightly as I could, pressing her face into me so she couldn't lift her head. "Then look upon me," the voice said. We didn't look. When the fire flared back to life, the room erupted in screams. My grandfather lay exactly as before, but my grandmother was gone. Not dead. Gone. Her chair stood empty, no body, no mark on the floor, nothing to show she had ever been there at all. Later, when the house was quiet again, I opened Margaret's hand. Inside her palm lay the small black stone my grandfather had given me years ago. He used to say it protected him once, long ago, though he never explained how. I don't know if it saved us. I only know that my grandmother answered when something asked a question, and we didn't. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is very still, I close my eyes and remember that emptiness, the feeling of being nowhere at all. And I wonder if it remembers where I live.
As I write this, I'm nursing a glass of whiskey on my back porch. I don't know how to describe what I'm feeling right now. It's been 11 years since he disappeared. That kid has been my whole world since the day he was born. His mother hasn't been in his life since he was a baby. It's a long and frankly traumatic story, so I won't tell it here. But to condense it, she's an addict, and only God knows where. So, I've been Ozzy's legal guardian since he was 2. October 31st, 2014. Ozzy told me he was going out with his friends for the night. I remember it so vividly. His face, with brown freckles like his mother. The mole on his neck that I have too. I've played that day in my mind 1,000 times. Every detail in Technicolor again and again, just to have something to hold on to. His mop of curly dark hair, the red hockey jersey he was wearing, his jeans, his mother's ring he wore on a chain around his neck. All of it. I didn't know at the time, but him and his friends had actually planned to explore, party, and spend the night in the old abandoned house a few kilometers from town. That house always gave me the creeps. Even after years of being a sheriff and having my fair share of unexplained experiences, it just makes my skin crawl. Even more so now, after all this. That house has a sordid history. In the 30s, the man who owned it threw a dinner party/family gathering. He then proceeded to chain the doors shut from the outside, climb back in through a window, and slaughter everyone inside. People have told stories about it being haunted since I was a child back in the 70s. It's become a local legend. People took to calling it the Red Finch Manor. And it's been a long-standing dare among teens to stay in there overnight. Most don't make it past midnight before they call it quits and hoof it back up the old road back to town. I can't even tell you how many times I've had to drive tipsy teenagers back home in the black and white off that road at absolutely ungodly hours. Ozzy grabbed his stuff and left around 7 p.m. I wished I had listened to the pit in my guts and grabbed him by the arm and told him no. I was the one to report him missing around 4 a.m. when he hadn't come home. I didn't sleep that night despite having work at 6 in the morning. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was God warning me, or whatever it is in that house calling out to me, that it had taken my little boy. I was sitting on my couch, my phone in my lap with my thumb hovering over the button. I didn't call 911, I called my boss, Frank. He would have gotten there faster anyways. The line rung a few times before his groggy voice answered. Jesus, Joey. This better be good. It's 4 a.m. I felt sick. Like at a moment's notice, I was going to hurl onto the hardwood floors of my living room. Frank, get over here, please. It's an emergency. Ozzy. Frank, the kid's gone. I said, my voice shaking more than I had ever heard it. It felt like my entire world was already crashing down, even though a logical person would have been able to rationalize, come up with explanations. But for some reason I just knew. I knew. Frank didn't say much else, and he was in my kitchen with me in less than 5 minutes. I vaguely remember crying. At that time I hadn't cried in probably years, at least not like that. I was in hysterics, pacing in my kitchen insisting that something terrible happened. We searched for hours, trekking through the woods, knocking on doors, looking everywhere. Something pulled me to that god-forsaken house. Some otherworldly tether drew me there that night. Myself, a few deputies, Frank, and over a dozen volunteers walked the 2 or so clicks down the dirt road. The sky was turning from the dark black of night to a deep blue as daybreak approached. The manor came into view, and I had this horrible, soul-crushing dread. 19 people swept that house with flashlights, and we didn't find a trace of the kids who went missing that night. Those 5 kids got headstones a few years back. For 3 years I practically drowned myself in whiskey. I lost myself in grief. I had constant nightmares. Dreams about all the horrible possibilities of what could have happened to my nephew. I'm better now, but I can't say I had healed. Ozzy was my only family at the time, though I've since gotten married. His grandfather and grandmother passed in 1991 and 2008, respectively. My sister has been way off the deep end and not in speaking terms with me since 2000 when I took custody of Ozzy. Fast forward to a week ago, December 7th, 2025. I'm still working as a sheriff, and admittedly still mourning on some level. I hadn't thought I'd ever fully get past losing him. I was on duty, sitting in my patrol car eating cheap fried fast food when my radio crackled to life. 10:32, this is Deputy Ross. I need another unit at 762 Country Road 144. And call forensics. The abandoned house. That same abandoned house that the less rational part of my brain insisted had stolen Ozzy. I pressed the button and spoke. 10-4, this is Sheriff McKinney. ETA 3 minutes. I flicked on my lights and sirens and peeled out of the parking lot like a bat out of hell. They say death has a smell. Something specific that can't be replicated, and I can assure you that's very true. Like rotting meat sprayed with a sickly sweet perfume. It was faint, but I could smell it despite the fact the freezing cold had practically frozen the body lying in the snow solid. I didn't need to look long to know the body belonged to one of those missing kids. I'll say it again, we found a body. A dead body, not bones. After 11 years. A body. How the hell wasn't this kid just scattered bones we would dig up after the spring thaw? And what the hell happened to him? Because he was cut up pretty bad. I'll save you the gory details, but it was bad. Really bad. Coroner said he'd been dead less a few days. December 2nd, she told me. Stabbed to death. Poor kid bled out right there in the snowbank. That's crazy enough. Finding someone freshly dead after over a decade. But the part that left us with even more questions was, why the hell did he still look 17? He should have been 28, so why did he still look the exact same as the missing persons poster we plastered all over the city a few clicks away? Christ, he looked exactly like he did in the senior photos I helped his mom take. This was messed up. Did some sick guy preserve him? Keep him alive for 11 years and he just aged insanely well? What was this? I didn't sleep that night either. My wife Winona sat up with me. I had too many questions to relax long enough to sleep. I was jittery, on edge. December 14th, 2025. Tonight Winona was at her sister's house and I was alone. The place feels empty without her. Almost eerie, like some strange isolationist dream where I was the only man left alive. Then something changed. I felt that same feeling I did the night Ozzy disappeared, except in reverse. I can't describe it any other way. It was like I had this sudden lump in my throat and I don't know, whatever the opposite of dread is. Like when you remember something you'd forgotten years ago, and the memory comes rushing back and suddenly everything makes sense and everything is right again. Don't get me wrong. It still freaked me out. But I suppose the Lord wasn't done with me because I thought I was having a stroke when I heard something I hadn't heard in over 10 years echo from my backyard. Hello, Uncle Joey? I didn't even think. Not a single thought went through my head as I jumped off my couch, across my kitchen, and crashed out my back door still in my gym shorts and tank top despite the freezing temperature. There in the foot-deep snow was my boy. There was Ozzy, still in the same clothes, slowly cutting through the shining powder snow. It felt like time stopped. His jersey was ripped. He was covered in blood and I'm still not sure how much of it was his. The lab hasn't called me back yet. Had I died in my sleep? Was this some kind of afterlife? It took a minute for my brain to turn back on and actually process what the hell I was seeing. Kiddo? I called out, my voice uneasy. I cut myself off, bounding off my back porch and into the snow. Who knows how long he's been out in the cold? It's December in northern Ontario, for fuck's sake. It was near 30 below. It didn't matter how the hell he was alive. All that mattered was that he didn't freeze to death. When I managed to haul Ozzy inside, he just cried. I held him in my lap on my kitchen floor like he was a toddler again, until Frank and an ambulance got here. My mind was elsewhere. What the hell was I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do now? That I'm in the middle of all this. The rest was kind of a blur. Frank called forensics again to look at the house. Test the blood on Ozzy's clothes. I don't really remember much up until I got home about 2 hours ago. It's 4 a.m., and I'm bundled in about 5 layers drinking a glass of the strongest whiskey I had in the house. He's still 17. Ozzy didn't have much to say other than frantically asking about his friends and the house. About a man. A specific man. Remember how I mentioned the house's history? The massacre in the 30s? Yeah, I don't really know what to make of it either. All I know is that, according to Ozzy, whatever the hell is in that house bleeds. And if it bleeds, I can kill it. I've got a 12 gauge in my lap right now. It's taking every ounce of restraint in me to not march over there with as many slugs as money can buy, and as much gasoline as I can carry to burn the place in holy fire. If I do, I'll let you know if I can wipe that godforsaken place off the face of the planet. If not just for Ozzy. If at least for the other 3 kids whose bodies we haven't found yet. This is me signing off. I need to put down the whiskey and go get some sleep before I do something stupid.
Every neighborhood has a place children are warned to never cross. A tunnel, a fence, a creek, sometimes just a street or an abandoned house. A line drawn in fear, and if you dare step past it, something bad will take you. In my town, the Forbidden Zone was a decommissioned storm drain at the edge of town. The story went that something lived inside it, something that might once have been a man. It would come out at night and prowl the nearby streets, searching for children. Once it found one, it would shove the child into a large burlap sack and drag it back into the bowels of the drain, where it would devour them whole, leaving barely anything behind. Sometimes a shoe, sometimes a tooth. Others, just a fingernail. As children, we believed every word of it. It became a common dare to see who was brave enough to approach the drain, or even step inside it. And truth be told, the kids who took that challenge too far tended to go missing. Everyone said they'd fallen victim to the bag man. Things got so bad that a curfew was issued, parents panicked, and eventually the drain was sealed off. After that, the disappearances stopped, and life returned to normal. Children were safe again. Of course, as adults, we told ourselves the truth was simpler and far less supernatural. Storm drains are dangerous places. Dark, slick, confusing mazes where a child could fall, get lost, drown, or break a neck without needing any monster at all. That was what I believed. That was what I told myself for years. Until I finally went in myself. It had been a long time since I'd come back home. Years since I'd even thought about the drain. I was standing on my parents' porch one evening, watching the sun sink behind the hills, when I noticed a faint glimmer in the distance, too far away to make out clearly, but I knew exactly where it was coming from. The drain. I stood there longer than I meant to, staring at that distant flicker of reflected light, chuckling to myself as I remembered the stories. That was when the worst idea I'd ever had crossed my mind. "Hey Hunter, want to do something cool?" I called into the house. A few seconds later, a smiling face appeared at the doorway. "What are we doing, Uncle Micah?" he asked, adjusting the Lakers cap perched on his head. "We're going on an adventure," I said, and his face lit up immediately. "But don't tell your mom. It's a secret." He nodded eagerly as I handed him my pinky, sealing the pact like it was sacred. I ran to the garage and rummaged around until I found 2 flashlights, a bolt cutter, and an old hard hat. I gave the helmet to Hunter, and he proudly set it over his cap like it was armor. At the time, I told myself this was about bonding, about making memories. I'd missed most of his childhood because of work, and despite being older than my sister, life hadn't blessed me with children of my own. It was a stupid decision. I know that now. We headed down the street toward the drain as dusk bled into night. The last of the daylight vanished behind the hills, leaving the area bathed in the sickly yellow glow of aging street lamps. Hunter skipped beside me, already flicking his flashlight over every crack in the pavement, narrating his discoveries with excitement. I smiled, even as something tight coiled in my stomach. The drain was blocked by a large wooden fence, mostly rotted through with age. I told Hunter to step back while I pried away a panel wide enough for us to slip through. As soon as we did, the stench hit us. Stale water, rust, and something sour beneath it. "Pew!" Hunter exclaimed. And I laughed, though the smell clung to the back of my throat. Beyond that was a second barrier, a rusted metal fence bolted directly over the mouth of the drain. Attached to it was a warning sign that had once been bright yellow. though now only a corner of paint remained. The word danger was still embossed in the metal, visible when my flashlight passed over it. I should have listened. While Hunter played with his light, I used the bolt cutter to carve out an opening. The metal groaned and snapped louder than I liked. Each sound echoed down the darkness. Eventually, we squeezed through. The moment I stepped inside, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. A strange buzzing filled my chest, like static just under my skin, and adrenaline flushed through me without reason. "What is this place?" Hunter asked, his voice smaller now as he moved deeper into the tunnel. "It's just an old drainage pipe," I said, trying to sound casual. "Pretty neat, right?" He didn't answer right away. Our footsteps echoed unnaturally, overlapping and stretching until it sounded like someone else was walking with us. "I don't know," he finally said, his voice wavering. "It's fine," I replied, resting a hand on his shoulder. He yelped in surprise, dropping his flashlight. It clattered on the ground and went dark. The sudden loss of light made the darkness feel thick, almost wet, as if it had weight to it, pressing against my eyes and skin. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move, my brain lagging behind the instinct to panic. I dropped to one knee, fumbling blindly, my fingers brushing cold concrete before closing around the flashlight. I smacked it once against my palm, then again, harder this time, the hollow sound echoing down the tunnel. Nothing. A third smack finally coaxed it back to life, the beam sputtering weakly before stabilizing. As the light returned, something deep within the tunnel shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't even clear, just a subtle displacement, like water disturbed far away, but it was enough to make my stomach clench. My mouth went dry, the taste of metal and ash coating my tongue, and I realized I'd stopped breathing. I forced air back into my lungs slowly, carefully, as if any sudden movement might draw attention. "Maybe that's enough adventure for today," I said, my voice higher than I meant it to be as I handed the flashlight back to Hunter. He didn't argue, he didn't joke. He just nodded, tight and quick, gripping the light with both hands like it was a lifeline. For a few seconds there was nothing but the drip of water and the echo of our breathing. I started to convince myself it had been nothing, that fear had filled in the gaps where reason should have been. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not a scuffle, not a scrape. Measured, deliberate steps echoing from deep within the tunnel, each one landing with enough weight to carry through the concrete. They came slow at first, spaced far apart, like whatever was walking didn't need to hurry. Every nerve in my body screamed at once. "Run outside now," I shouted. Hunter didn't hesitate. His footsteps pounded away from me, frantic and uneven, shrinking rapidly as he fled toward the opening. I swung the flashlight back into the darkness, the beam jittering as my hands shook. "Who's there?" I called, my voice cracking despite my effort to steady it. The light swept across bare walls, pooled water, rust-stained concrete. Nothing moved. No shape, no sound beyond the distant drip and the fading echo of my nephew's escape. I let out a shaky laugh, forcing air through clenched teeth. "You're being stupid," I muttered. "It's just a rat, or pipes settling." I turned to call Hunter back, already rehearsing how I'd laugh this off later, when something landed beside me with a wet, meaty splash, like a heavy sack dropped into a shallow puddle. The sound was too close. I turned. The beam caught a face inches from mine, skin stretched gray and slick over bone, eyes sunken and bloodshot, reflecting the light like those of an animal caught in headlights. Its mouth split into a grin far too wide, teeth blackened and broken, the stink of rot rolling off of it in waves. I tried to scream, but a hand closed around my throat before sound could escape, fingers digging in with impossible strength. The world tilted as it shoved me back. my spine slamming into the damp wall hard enough to rattle my teeth. Air vanished from my lungs as the grip tightened. From the corner of my eye, I saw the burlap sack resting against the tunnel floor. The bottom of it was soaked dark, stiff with old stains that glistened wetly in the flashlight's glow. I thrashed uselessly, my hands clawing at its wrist, my boots scraping against the concrete for purchase. It leaned closer, close enough that I could see the cracks in its skin. The filth caked into every fold. The smell was overwhelming. Decay, stagnant water, something sweet and sickly beneath it all. It sniffed me once, then again, slow and deliberate, before dragging its tongue across my cheek. The touch was cold and slick. I gagged. Too ripe, it gurgled, its voice bubbling like water forced through mud. The pressure vanished as suddenly as it had come. I hit the ground hard, air crashing back into my lungs in a painful rush. I didn't look back. I didn't think. I ran. I burst through the fence, grabbed Hunter, and didn't stop until we were back at my parents' house. My clothes clung to me, soaked through with sweat, my chest burning with every breath. Hunter sobbed into my shoulder, his small body shaking. My sister came running out, snatching him from my arms, her face twisted with fear and fury. She never asked what happened. Hunter never understood what he'd almost been a part of, and I kept my mouth shut, clinging to the hope that silence might seal the nightmare away. It didn't. The next day, Hunter was gone. His cap was found near the old drain. After that, the disappearances started again.
In tonight's video, I will be telling 6 stories. What really lurks in the fog? How bad can a camping trip really get? How does one hack reality? All of these questions and more will be answered tonight. A huge thank you to the incredible writers who allowed me to share these stories with all of you. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. Also, if you didn't notice already, this video is an hour long. You guys were pretty vocal about how much you liked them on the last video. So as long as these keep getting that kind of support, I'll keep making them. And of course, I'd like to say thank you for all of the incredible support. I was pretty blown away. But I'll stop ruining the immersion now. If you enjoy the video, likes and comments are always appreciated, as it lets me know that I'm doing a good job. Subscribing if you're new is as well. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I live in a small town in Montana. Most towns there are small to begin with. My family were major farmers that had their own 50-acre property up in the mountains. We also had 3 cats and 7 dogs. I was pretty spoiled when I was younger. My brother and myself would walk down a dusty 2-mile trail down to our farm, where there were animals that included pigs, cows, chickens, geese, and much more. We grew apple trees, peach trees, pears, peas, carrots, and corn. Once we arrived to the farm, we would start our daily chores in the relentless heat that burned the back of our necks. Some of our chores consisted of planting new seeds, caring for the animals, milking the cows, pulling weeds out of the dirt, and watering some nearby flowers. By 5 o'clock we would be done with our chores, and at 6 supper was ready. When my brothers and I walked in, we were always greeted by the fresh new smell of steak, cooked carrots, and freshly baked rolls. The rolls were my family's very favorite meal. My mom was always delighted to make them for us, and never failed to impress us with not only the taste, but with looks and the smell. My mother was a small lady. She was 5'6" with brown hair, and beautiful hazel eyes. My father always said her eyes twinkled in the dark. She always wore some kind of dress with animals or flowers on it. My dad was a bigger guy. Him being a farmer all of his life, he had some serious muscle gain, and even his shadow scared me for how big he was. He was bald, and it always appeared shiny. The sun sometimes reflected off him so much that it blinded me if I looked at it for too long. He wore a cowboy hat in public. He had a mix of green and hazel in his eyes. If you met him, the first impression you would get from him is that he was strict and mean, but in reality, he was not very strict at all, and was extremely caring and nice, but he was very protective. I remember while I was growing up that I always would strive to be like him in any way I could. My brothers made fun of me because they thought I was a suck-up, but really I just loved my father and looked up to him quite a bit. I had 3 other brothers. John was the oldest. He had short red hair and was like a giant, at least to me. He wore a camouflage cap all the time, and I got concerned if he ever washed it. I kid you not. You knew he was coming because you could smell the sweat from his hat from 50 feet away. He had darker brown eyes than the rest of us, and as older brothers are, he was very bossy and commanding. Daniel was the second oldest. He was just about as tall as John, and they were only 2 years apart in age. He had green eyes, blonde hair, and was skinnier than most of us. Anthony was the youngest. He had a squeaky voice kind of like Arliss from Old Yeller. He was shorter than the rest of us, but surprisingly strong. He had most of our mom's features, but he had our dad's otherworldly strength. Then you have me, the second youngest of the bunch. I had a balance of both my parents' features and personality. My dad said I had the heart of a warrior, and my mom said I had the looks of an angel. Our cats were always out and about, and would come around for their breakfast and dinner. Our dogs were the ones that always went down with us for our work. Most of the time they would stay out of the way, but sometimes they would see something move in the bushes, and run across the field digging up plants, and it would get on our nerves. Our dad would be working out in the trees cutting them down for wood. For the most part, our family was, I guess to put it simply, normal. There was only one thing I thought was always strange about my family. My family hated the fog, or rather, what they thought lay in the mysterious mist. This was the only thing that was more important than hard work. If we knew the fog was coming, we were instructed to drop everything we were doing now, no matter what, and hurry back to our home and wait out the fog. I always despised the idea for so many reasons, but the main one was that I could almost be done with a project, and then I would have to quit just because of some clouds. I would ask my brothers why we had to leave work, and they would say that I should just do as I'm told and not ask any questions. I never received any sort of answer to this until I was 16 years old. The past few days were stormy and cloudy, so it made work harder and more difficult than usual. Mud filled the fields and caused major trouble for us trying to get through to the animals. The winds were so bad that it blew some of the newly planted crops out of the ground. My brothers and I were furious of all the extra hours we had to put in because of a pathetic storm. My dad wasn't so fond of the idea either. We spent hours working non-stop, and we were all tired and exhausted, and we were getting fed up, so we all decided to take a trip to town for some drinks and food. My mouth watered at the thought of a nice cold Mountain Dew, with some freshly cooked chicken tenders. Once we got to town, we picked up some drinks, and some delicious snacks from a gas station closest to us. Once we got back up to the house, my parents were inside on the couch. My mother and father had looked very disappointed and angry. "Mom, Dad, are you okay?" I asked while putting my cold soda on the kitchen counter. "Where have you boys been? We've been worried sick. Fog is supposed to roll in at any minute." My father snapped at myself and my brothers. My brothers all apologized immediately like they were being programmed to do so on command, right then and there. I remained silent. I was getting furious with my parents, and I was exhausted and burned out by everything we had been doing the past few days, so I snapped back at them. "Why do we always have to go inside for clouds that are lower than usual? I want some answers, and I want them now." I shouted while staring sharply into my dad's eyes. My dad started to make up excuses to cut off the conversation by dismissing us. I quickly cut him off track. "No, don't ignore my questions. I think I deserve answers," I called out. I could hear the rage in my vocals as I spoke. My dad stared me down, then spoke in almost a whisper. "Boys, go to your rooms. Your brother and I need to have a talk," he said while looking me directly in the eyes. My heart sank because I thought I was gonna get it from my dad. My brothers solemnly walked to their rooms, while I stood by the kitchen counter in silence. I looked out the front windows before my mother drew the curtains over them. It was getting really foggy, and it was dense too. I could only vividly see the gates in our front yard. I'm not gonna lie, it did make me a little uneasy. My parents motioned me over to have a seat on the couch. I sat down and put my hands on my lap and waited for one of them to speak. Finally, my dad started to talk. "Son, you are right to be angry with us, and we do owe you answers and our apologies," my father explained. "Listen to your father, okay?" My mother pleaded. I looked at her as she said this, and she had an expression of fear and worry in her eyes. I turned my full attention back to my father. Once he took notice I was listening, he started to speak again. "Your grandfather and grandmother were hard workers just like us, but they also feared the fog. I wanted to know why they did the things they did just like you. One day I got my answer." I was a little taken by what he was saying, because it wasn't just us who kept away from the fog. Sweat trickled down my back as I listened with more intent. "The reason you have never met your grandparents from my side is because they were taken with the fog. I don't know what took them, but they were gone." My eyes widened as I saw my father was tearing up. I had never seen him like this before, but I held my breath and let him continue. Then the thought did cross my mind. I always seemed to wonder why we never saw my dad's parents. I just thought that they lived somewhere far away in a different state, not fog taking them somewhere unknown. I gave my father a look of disbelief, and he took notice. "I know how it sounds, but it's true. I have never lied to you, have I?" He questioned me. My father was many things, but a liar was not one of them. "I know, Dad, I believe you," I stammered. We left it at that, and I headed towards my room when I was stopped by my mother. She looked at me with a soft smile, and with a whisper, she told me I was the only one that Dad had told about the fog. My tongue was tied and I didn't know what to say, so I gave her a hug and went to my room. It wasn't until last night that I found out what lurked inside the mist. I am now 29 years old, and all my brothers moved out in their own place, but I decided to move close to my parents' property. I had my own remote house in the woods, with plenty of land to do whatever I wanted. As always, I stayed indoors when the fog came, but last night was different. I was walking back to my house from watering some plants a little way down my dirt trail, when I noticed that there might be some fog, so I picked up my pace a little. I still had time before it arrived, so I should be safe. I had a flashlight with me just in case. I worked too late in the evening and couldn't see. They did happen from time to time, so it always came in handy. The air was getting colder, and the sweat on my body was dripping all over my head. About halfway up the trail I heard a voice. It was faint, but it sounded like it was distressed. I called out to it, but I got nothing in return. Thinking I must have just been working hard and was tired, I just brushed it off as some kind of hallucination. As I continued, I noticed I was getting lightheaded and dizzy. It wasn't long before I stumbled over and hit my head on what seemed to be a rock. It was mere seconds before I blacked out, but I saw something walking around me. It was hard to tell what it was, but soon it was all darkness. I woke up with an enormous headache, and my head pounded against my skull. I tried to look around me, but I was surrounded by mist. It took a while to fully understand the dire situation I was in. My head still felt like it was going to crack, but I had to get back to the house. My legs wobbled and felt weak with every step I took, my body wanting to throw up, and I knew instantly I was dehydrated and I needed water fast. Disoriented, I kept going with a steady pace. It wasn't long before I heard them. A mixture of young and old voices surrounding me like some kind of messed up choir. Each step I took, the voices got closer. Pretty soon the voices turned into high-pitched screams. They rang in my ears and eventually rang in my head, and it only made my condition worse. Not long, I could see my house in the near distance, and with all my strength I ran back to the house with the scream still continuing. I was right in front of the gate, and I touched it with my sweaty fingers, but something stopped me. The scream stopped, and it was just silent. No birds, crickets, and even trees swaying in the wind. My eyes darted quickly in every direction to make sure I was alone. I turned around to the gate, and that is when I heard an earth-shattering horn. It shook the ground on which I stood upon, almost knocking me off my feet. I sat on the ground thinking of what I could do. My mind raced and it felt like my heart was going to pop out of my chest. I sat there with my arms cradling my legs when the horn ceased. Not even 5 minutes later, I looked up and saw hundreds upon hundreds of black figures. ranging from 5 to at least 60 years old. They all gave off a menacing vibe that haunts me. They all spoke in unison and chanted some unknown language I'd never heard before. They all started to near me with each passing second. At this point, I would like to say I ran, but I didn't. At least not until I saw all the eyes. Their eyes haunt me as I type this out. They looked like they had gone mad. Their eyes were bloodshot, pupils blackened and their eyelids wide open. Still chanting, they neared closer and closer. Finally, my brain took a fight or a flight response, and I ran. I hopped over the fence into my yard, and when I got to my front door, I looked back one more time. They were all in front of the gate. I don't know how they were visible through the mist, but they were. I quickly slammed open the door and shut it and locked it. I could still hear their chanting in the background. I cradled myself on the floor until I fell asleep. Now here we are today. I'm writing this from a hotel because service sucks in the mountains, and I don't plan on going back up there. I am selling the property to a guy from Utah that goes by the name Hudson. I would tell him and warn him of the dangerous, but he would never believe me. If you go up to Montana, never stay in the fog. I have no doubt in my mind that those are the things that took my grandparents, and I don't want you or anyone else to be their next victim. Before I start, I want to say first that I'm not what anyone would call a superstitious person. Not to say that I'm closed-minded or anything, at least I don't think so. So much as I've noticed that if you leave your mind open enough, your brains are liable to fall right out. So when you see what I'm about to tell all of you, I was told this was a community that tended to be less skeptical of strangeness. Y'all might understand why I've had so much trouble wrapping my head around what happened. That's the question I keep asking myself over and over. What happened? I can't explain it, no matter which way I look at it. And I've tried to, believe me. I've spent the past few nights unable to sleep, driving myself up the damn wall trying to put a name, an explanation to what happened. During the summer I like to get outdoors every chance I get, be it swimming, hiking, or camping. You're apt to find me somewhere outside more often than not. Last week, for example, I was out camping. Not in any official campgrounds, though where I live there are plenty to be found. That time around, I was itching for something with a bit more solitude, and a friend of mine had mentioned a lake they'd been to with good fishing. Safe to say I was immediately interested. Do some fishing, maybe even catch something to cook up later in the evening. It sounded like a pretty good time. Trouble was, when I finally had time to get out that way, I couldn't find the lake. I don't know if I misremembered the instructions my friend gave, or if maybe he's just really bad at directions. But either way, I wound up in a foresty area with no lake in sight. It was a beautiful forest though, and even had this perfect blend to set up my tent. What was more interesting though, was the rock formation I found. Well, I called a formation, but it had obviously been set there. A fair long while ago too, if I'm any judge. It was this circle of stones, a perfect circle of them, and just a few steps beyond the circle was a large stone. I'd say 3 feet high maybe, and around 2 feet wide. It was dipped slightly in the center, almost looking like it was just waiting for someone to sit down on it. Y'all probably can guess what happened next, right? Of course I sat on it. Who wouldn't? It was just so weird, and kind of funny at the time to find it there, just waiting for a butt to introduce itself. So I plunked myself right down, and almost immediately felt uncomfortable. I'm not talking like it was an uncomfy seat for my fragile derriere. No, when I say uncomfortable, I mean I felt like I was a kid caught with their hand in the cookie jar, you know? Like I'd just done something very, very naughty, and the adults had looked in at just the right time to see it. There was no reason for me to feel that way though, and being my stubborn self, I tried to ignore it. Sat there a few seconds longer, even just to be spiteful to the odd sensation, before hopping right back up. Not because I was suddenly creeped out, of course. No, nothing like that at all, or so I told myself. But because I had a tent that needed setting up, and right there, just a few feet from these stones was the perfect spot. After I had my tent set up and my things stowed away, I set about fixing myself a nice dinner of roasted hot dogs. It wasn't fish, but they were still tasty, and the smell of them roasting was mouth-watering. The only thing that really marred it was this odd smell. Pungent is a good word for it. Almost sweet, sort of, but also rotten. I hadn't seen anything earlier, but nature is metal and things die all the time. What puzzled me though was the way the scent seemed to travel. I know that sentence makes no sense. I know. But when I say that I mean, say one moment it would be coming from the east, but then a few moments later, it'd be coming from the north. Sometimes it smelled stronger, sometimes fainter, and always it seemed to be coming from different areas. I brushed that riddle off as nothing more than a trick of the breeze, even though there hadn't really been any kind of breeze that evening, and continued on with my night and my meal, with that smell wafting up and growing stronger and fainter throughout it. It goes without saying that eating supper was a bit less than pleasant that night. I turned in early that night. I wanted to explore the area in the morning, see what I could discover while I was in the area, but I didn't get to sleep immediately. It was too quiet, you see. Not like I'm a city girl and this lack of sirens is spooking me. I just mean silence. There weren't any crickets, owls, nothing was making a sound, and it was more than a bit unnerving. Eventually, I got to sleep. I guess it must have been around 1 or 2 in the morning. Instead of a good night's rest, what I got was some of the freakiest, most vivid nightmares I've ever had the misfortune of experiencing. They were like a parade of weird and horrible, and while I can't recall them all, one of them was seared into my brain. I doubt I'll ever manage to forget it. In the dream, I was standing outside my tent, close to those odd stones. I say I was, but it was more like I was a different person, an observer, I guess. Anyway, I was standing there just staring at my tent until movement within the circle of stones caught my eye. There were 3 women standing there. I don't think they'd been there before, but in the dream it didn't seem terribly important. They weren't there, and now they were, and that was just as it should be somehow. Those 3 women, though, they stood in a line. On the left was a woman that can only really be described as a crone. Beyond ancient, wrinkles on her wrinkles, and hunched over from age. On the right was a woman that was more middle-aged. Not really young anymore, but not quite old yet either. And right in the middle between them was a young woman, right in the first flush of youth. It was the young woman that had my attention in the dream, not because she was some overwhelming beauty or whatever, but because she was very obviously very pregnant. Also, she was holding a hatchet. I know that seems like something I probably should have stated first, but again, in the dream that was just oddly unimportant. As I watched them, it was the crone that spoke up first, uttering a single, but very harsh, no, that seemed to reverberate in my mind, and left me with a feeling like I should be ashamed of something. The second to speak was the middle-aged woman who, just like her elderly counterpart, spoke only that single no, this time leaving me feeling like I should apologize, beg forgiveness for things I didn't even understand. It was when that middle woman spoke, her blank eyes staring into mine as she spoke too, echoing that single no each of them had uttered, hatchet in her hand lifting. When she spoke, however, it wasn't shame or contriteness I felt, or should have felt. It was fear, a bone-deep fear that left me cold, in that abstract and disconnected way I felt in the dream. It was when the last echo of their single spoken word faded that the hatchet came down, not on me, or on the 2 women. No, she brought it right down on her belly. There wasn't any blood, and this seemed somehow reasonable in the dream. Just the sound of flesh being hacked away with each swing she brought down against herself, and the sight of dark, empty space peeking out from within the split flesh. After several swings, I'm not certain how many, the woman dropped the hatchet to the ground. That seemed to signal the old woman to action, as she turned to face the young woman and shoved her hands into the gaping hole that she'd hacked into her belly, and pulled out something. I don't know how to describe it, or explain it. It should have been a baby, but the thing that was pulled out of that woman was the farthest thing from human. Its skin seemed to ripple, and almost surge along its tiny frame to the old woman's hands while she held it, caressing her fingers in little waves of flesh. Staring at it hurt, watching the way its skin crawled and crept hurt. Catching sight of the eyes that seemed to blink in and out of existence along its body hurt, and hearing it speak was agony. That was when I woke up. Nose bleeding, ears bleeding, and my body shaking like I was having a seizure. It was light outside and the sun was out and I was freezing. From the inside out, everything felt like ice, like I'd never be warm again. When I was finally able to move, I packed up my stuff. I left the tent. There were things scratched into the canvas of the tent. Faint, but there, and so painful to watch when they squiggled and morphed with each blink of the eye. That was last week. There have been moments when I'm thinking about what happened, trying to understand what happened, when I feel that aching cold sink back into my bones, when my nose, my ears begin to bleed again. I don't understand what happened, but I'm starting to think I should stop trying. It happened a few months after my boyfriend Kevin, our friend Ron, and I moved into an apartment together. To this day, for the life of me, I have no idea what it was, or what it wanted. What would have happened if things went differently? That thought scares me. Sorry, let me tell you what happened. Then you can give me your opinion. We had been renting the apartment for close to a year now. We being Kevin, my boyfriend, our friend Ron, and of course myself. The apartment wasn't anything special, just your average 2-bedroom with 1-bath apartment. There was a coat closet to the right of the entrance, and the living room was right when you walked in. The back of the living room connected with the kitchen/dining area, and to the right of the living room next to the coat closet was a hallway. Down the hallway to the left was the bathroom, and the right was Kevin and my room. Well, at the end of the hallway was Ron's room. Funny enough, I remember there being no light for the living room. The main light source was the hallway light. Anyway, I worked graveyard shifts for a gas station, while Kevin and Ron worked the afternoons. We rarely had the same days off, so half the time I had the apartment to myself. One day after my shift, I came home exhausted and went straight to bed, thanking God that it was my day off. Kevin was sound asleep already, so it was nice cuddle time for me. By the time I woke up, the sun was starting to set, so our room was dark, but I could still see Kevin sleeping next to me. I knew it was a day off for him and Ron, so I figured they may have just drank too much, and he really just needed to sleep it off. Not wanting to disturb him, I went to the living room to watch TV. I didn't turn on the hallway light though. We had sent the living room up with chairs instead of sofas. The TV was in the corner next to the entrance, so there would be no glare on the screen. The chair I sat in was closest to the hallway, so I could see into it out of the corner of my eye. About 15 minutes into the show, which was some ghost show, I heard the door to Kevin and mine's bedroom open. I look over to see his shadow standing just at the edge of the hallway and living room. The light of the TV didn't really reach the hallway, so I could only make out his outline in the darkness. "Hey babe, sorry, did I wake you?" I asked, turning down the volume. "I had a terrible dream. I feel like I'm still trapped in it. Come to bed with me, please?" "Sit next to me, we can talk about it. Or you can watch this with me and take your mind off it." I patted the chair next to me. I didn't want to go back to bed, since there was a possibility I would fall asleep, and I wanted to spend time with him. Hear what he had to say if he wanted to talk about his dream. "There was fire, and so much smoke. I feel like I can't breathe. Honey, come to bed with me, please. I need to know you're okay." He sounded frightened. "Kevin, it's okay. Come here and we'll talk about it." I still didn't get up. "You don't understand. We had kids. The fire, the smoke, I couldn't get you. You kept calling out to me. Come to bed with me, please. I need to hold you, to feel you. I need to know I didn't... Calm down, it's okay. It was just a dream, I'm right here." He was starting to scare me at this point. I never heard him sound so scared, so desperate. "No, you don't get it. I tried to reach you. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Come to bed with me, please. I need to know that I didn't let you die." At that moment I stood up, to comfort him. God, that nightmare had really gotten to him. I was just about to start walking, when the front door opened. Ron and Kevin walked in with groceries in hand. What was I talking to? What would have happened if I had went to bed with it? When I was a kid, there was this little chant we would sing about the yellow man. You could usually spot him fishing on the bank of the river. He always sat a bit away from where most people set up towels and chairs. He was tall and thin, with a distended stomach that hung low and spilled over his tatted jean shorts, and his skin was yellow. He sits by the water. He wants to eat your daughter. He fishes in the river. He wants to cook your liver. The yellow man, runs faster than you think he can. Our parents said that he was sick and we shouldn't make fun of him or be afraid of him. But the hue of his skin and his aversion to the rest of the people in town weren't his only eccentricities. Some of the older boys would ride their bikes real close to where the yellow man would sit. One boy swore that the yellow man had a bucket full of dirty water he would dip a cup into and drink from. Another boy said that the bucket was full of newts. Maybe eating the newts is what turns him yellow. My friend Mallory commented once. Like a flamingo? I asked. Not a lot of bright yellow newts wandering around. Amir countered. My dad says the yellow man is sick, I said. I was yellow when I was born. Something about my liver, I think. That's gross, Mel. Amir said, and I told him to stop being a jerk, because I secretly thought Mallory was pretty. We talked about the yellow man a lot that last summer together, because it was really hot, and there wasn't anything to do except spend time by the river. One day Amir even ventured close to the yellow man, who was sitting shirtless in a dirty white plastic lawn chair. He was wearing a faded red baseball cap. Amir kicked a soccer ball casually closer and closer, while we watched with apprehension. When he came back, he reported, to us and anyone else that would listen, that the yellow man smelled like dead fish and 100% sweaty ass, and that what they said about the bucket was true. He also said that the yellow man looked right at him, and his eyes were bright blue. Amir's stepmom heard from some other moms that Amir had been bothering the yellow man. He was grounded for a week, and he told Mallory that his stepmom had hit him. This didn't sit well with Mel, because while I thought she was really pretty, Mel thought that Amir had the sunrise and set, even if he was kind of an ass sometimes. Mel snuck over to the house in the middle of the night. My parents are heavy sleepers, so I didn't have to do much sneaking to go outside. We sat on a bench in my mom's garden to talk. Mel was already several steps ahead of me in some conspiracy. I've talked to everyone. Did you know that 5 years ago a boy went missing? He left school and no one saw him again. But someone said they found bones and clothes in the woods. But when the cops went to check, all the evidence was gone. I didn't know that. It's true. And the cops think that it was the yellow man, and he ate that kid. No way, I said. Everyone knows the chant. He's going to eat your liver. And 10 years ago, a bunch of animals were found cut up with their organs taken out. I actually had heard about that. I think every town around the world has a similar mystery. Animals turn up dead with little to no explanation. Usually it stays a mystery, or it turns out to be the work of other animals. But I didn't say any of this. I just nodded. The thing is, Scott, what if the yellow man is a murderer, or like a cannibal, and Amir was so brave to get that close to him, and he got punished for it? Parents should believe their kids about someone who could be dangerous. We have to do something about it. Amir wasn't grounded anymore, but he was sulking and didn't come to the river one day. Mel wasn't there yet either. I went over to some of the older boys. They were sitting near their bikes, and one was showing the others a Zippo lighter with a flaming skull decal. Scotty, Bo called out to me. Hey, what do you think about the yellow man? I asked, indicating with a vague hand gesture to the yellow man spot on the beach. He wasn't there at the moment. He sits by the water. He wants to eat your daughter. Two of them chanted in unison. The boy with the Zippo, Felix, shrugged then said, I think he eats people. He fishes in the river, another boy chanted. He wants to cook your liver. The yellow man, all the boys shouted. Felix grabbed my arm, hard, and yanked me down into the sand. Runs faster than you think he can. He stage whispered. The boys erupted in laughter. I yanked my arm back and stood up. What evidence is there? What? Felix asked. Evidence. Proof. All I can tell is he's a weird-looking guy that no one has ever talked to. He drinks newts, David said in a voice that let me know I was the idiot here. That's just weird and gross. Nothing about that says he's a crazy cannibal or a psycho killer or... I was cut off when one of the boys said, "Tell him, Felix." Felix sighed dramatically, but he had an apprehensive look. "Tell him," his friends urged. I heard my dad talking to the basketball coach after school last year. I went to go listen because I thought he was trying to get me to join the team for college or whatever. So I was listening to them talk, but they were talking about this cop. He's the brother of the coach, and he had gotten a call about a peeping Tom that left a handprint on some lady's window. They couldn't match the print to anything, but the lady said it was the Yellow Man, so they looked back in really old cases and found the same prints and the same kind of stories. People saying it was the Yellow Man, but this is the only one recently. And then my dad said, "Wish we could get that guy for something. He gives me the creeps." And the coach said, "The cops won't do anything, not until someone turns up dead." I told Mel and Amir everything Felix told me. Amir said he didn't care, but Mel seemed to be on fire with a nervous energy. "We're going to get this guy." "Get him for what?" Amir asked with a laugh. "Everything. I mean, he's either a people-eating psycho or a creepy peeping Tom, and neither of those are good." I mused. "Okay," Amir said. "Then you two go get him." So we did. Mallory and I sat on a hill near the river, and waited until everyone was gone except for the Yellow Man. When it got dark, he pulled his shirt over his head and grabbed his chair, bucket and pole, and started a slow, loping walk along the water. We followed. He made his way along a worn dirt path to the back end of a mobile home park. His trailer was behind a line of trees, away from the others. We watched, hidden in the brush, while he put the bucket down by the ramshackle porch and leaned his pole against the railing. He went up the stairs and into the trailer. We waited a few minutes. It was getting darker, but we could still see well enough. I made the first move and walked, slowly, low to the ground, towards the bucket. I looked in and saw muddy water and a dirty styrofoam cup. I reached in and picked up the cup and tilted it towards me to see the contents. A fat black newt stared back at me. "Gross," Mel whispered over my shoulder. I gently poured the cup out onto the ground, and the newt plopped out with a wet sound. Mel took the cup from me and dipped it back in the bucket, but nothing else alive was in there. I gestured to the back of the trailer, and we made our way around. A light was on in one of the rooms, but a curtain was drawn so we couldn't see in. Mel pointed to another window. There wasn't a light on, but there weren't any blinds or a curtain. She peered in and shook her head. I took her place, and I couldn't see anything either. I pressed my palm against the window, and thought about how creepy it would be to see the Yellow Man staring at me from the outside. Mel made a sound behind me, and I turned to look. The Yellow Man was standing right next to her, one hand holding a fistful of Mel's hair, the other around her left wrist. He was naked. His stomach hung low to his thighs. I could see his ribs. I could see his bright, blue eyes. He held on to Mel and took a few steps back, towards the front of the trailer. I silently followed. The Yellow Man's long fingers were covered in dirt. His fingernails were black. He stopped at the foot of the porch steps. "Pick it up." The Yellow Man's voice was a harsh whisper. He was looking down at the discarded styrofoam cup. I obliged. "Dip it in the water." I bent down and filled the cup with the brown water. Mel had started to whimper. "Drink it." The Yellow Man croaked. "What?" I said. "Drink it." The Yellow Man yanked harder on Mel's hair, and she made a squeaking sound. "The newt's gone," I said stupidly. He snarled at me. His teeth were white. I threw the cup at his face and started to run down the hill. I heard Mel yell, and suddenly, she was in front of me. I stopped short, lost my balance, then fell to my knees. The Yellow Man loomed over me, Mel's hair still in his hand. In his other, he held the cup. "Drink the water, Scotty," he hissed at me. I did. I woke up by the river. A cop was shaking me awake. My parents had been looking for me. I was badly dehydrated, so they took me to the hospital for fluids. I didn't say anything about the Yellow Man, but I asked my dad where Mel was, and he said that she was probably at home. I was in the hospital for 2 days, then at home, grounded until school started. Mel wasn't at school. Amir hadn't heard from her either. I talked to Felix and Bo at school. I told them Mel and I had gone to the Yellow Man's house, and he'd grabbed her, and that I didn't remember anything else. Rumors started to fly that Mel and I had confronted the Yellow Man, that I'd fought him but he was too strong, and he took Mel to kill and eat. Another rumor was that Mel had lured me to the Yellow Man, and he'd taken my liver, Temple of Doom style, as they both ate it. Mel was considered to be a runaway. Amir told me that Mel had told him some things about her home life that weren't too pretty. To the cops, this must have been enough reason to not go looking for her. The stories in the chant about the Yellow Man still circulated. People said they saw him by the river most days. I didn't go to verify this. In my senior year of high school, I heard a new version of the chant. He sits by the water. He wants to eat your daughter. He watches you at night. His teeth are long and white. The Yellow Man, he'll cook your brain in a frying pan. Amir and I grew up. We went to college, moved out of town. Time went by, as it does. Amir messaged me recently, saying he had helped his dad move out of his old house to another town. He told me that there were several missing persons posters up, and he's asked a kid he saw at a gas station about them. The kid shrugged at first, but when Amir brought up the Yellow Man, the kid leaned in near Amir's ear dramatically, and in a hushed voice, said that everyone knew the Yellow Man had taken them and eaten them, but because he ate every bit, even the bones, there was never any evidence left to find. He's learned, the kid said, that he couldn't leave bones because a human leg bone had been found a year ago, and he was afraid he'd be caught if the police ever identified it and linked it back to him. Amir told me all of this with amusement. Isn't that crazy, Scott? A person goes missing in a small town, and it's always the boogeyman that did it. It's never, oh, they had a bad life and they ran off, like Mel did. Yeah, crazy, I said. The kid told me that the Yellow Man still hangs out by the river every once in a while. Said that one time, a kid hit a baseball too close, and the Yellow Man caught it without even looking up. Apparently he's got ninja-like reflexes now too. Crazy, I repeated, as I looked at my calendar to see if I had the next few days free to make a road trip. I'm at my old house, visiting my parents. An overdue visit. We usually just talk on the phone. It's a nice summer day. Sunny and hot. Some scattered clouds and a light breeze. A good day to go fishing. I think I'll take a walk to the water. Maybe I'll see a familiar face. Maybe I'll be brave enough to finally get some answers. This year has been a rough ride for me so far. I got out of a 3-year relationship last September, and work has been very hard to focus on. Before anyone suggests this, I am talking to someone. And yes, a professional. After a lot of weed usage, many talks with my counselor, and some more legitimate medication, this summer was supposed to be my time to start pulling myself out of the hole. So I rented this house. New place, new life, new me, you know? It was a nice enough place, 1,000 square feet, 1 bed, 1.5 baths. It even had a lawn that I could see myself mowing throughout the summer months. The landlord gave me a tour before the lease was signed and finalized. The bedroom was a little small, but I was looking for a lot of open space. I just wanted my little piece of the world, and this seemed like it could be it. At least for the 12-month lease agreement. There was only one weird thing about my meager home to be. I wanted to ask more questions when it came up during the tour, but I really didn't want to scrutinize a good thing. I'm afraid I made a large mistake. Murray McDonald was a bigger, middle-aged man with a round face, but weathered hands that he tucked into the back pockets of his jeans. Each time our tour took a little pause for me to survey the rooms. Our conversation through most of the half an hour or so I was there that day was a little more than eager questions being met with grunts to the affirmative, or negative serving as answers. Each time we came to a new spot to inspect, Murray would turn to me, hands in his big pockets, and raise his dark eyebrows, etching several furrows in his forehead as he did so. It was a tired look that let me know just how happy the man was to be answering my questions. But I asked nonetheless. I have a questioning nature. My ex said so anyways. This process was played out in the living room, the bedroom, and both bathrooms. It was simple enough. Nothing was out of the ordinary, and I was feeling excited to move in. Then we came to the kitchen, and Murray's demeanor changed entirely. As he walked in, He moved quickly past me down the narrow lane between the stove and the sink, and leaned his back against the wall on the far side of the room. It was the fastest I had seen him move since the tour began. I'll be honest and tell you it spooked me a little bit, but I shook it off, reaching for the thrilled feeling I'd been reveling in. The kitchen was definitely workable. It wasn't built for a team to cook in or anything, but once again, it would just be me. Everything was as clean as could be expected, and all the fixtures seemed to be in order. Satisfied, I turned with a smile to look at Murray, still leaning against the far wall. He wasn't looking at me. There were no raised eyebrows or lines of annoyance on his face. His eyes were wide and staring down at the tiled floor of the kitchen. His arms were crossed over his chest, and I spied a thin line of sweat running down his temple. The change from weary landlord to this alarmed state he seemed to be in now froze me where I stood. I stayed still and quiet for a moment that stretched over the interior of the little house, like mist settling over the world. The moment passed, and I swallowed with a little effort and spoke at last. "Murray?" He jumped at the sound, his wide eyes locking with mine. The intensity in that stare made me stumble back a step. At that, Murray seemed to remember why we were here, shook his head a little, and stood up a little straighter before he spoke. "Sorry about that," he grumbled, lost in a thought for a moment there, I guess. "No worries." I laughed shakily. Happens to me all the time. Not terribly convinced, I was ready to head out and leave this strange man to get lost in whatever thoughts he wanted to. I just wanted to get everything for the house settled and move forward. "Well, this all looks perfect," I said with a thin smile. "Anything else I should know about the place before I get moved in?" At this, Murray's face dropped a little. He took off his well-worn baseball cap and ran a hand through a thinning patch of dark hair beneath. Returning his gaze to me, Murray stepped away from the wall for the first time since we'd entered the kitchen, and I could finally see that it wasn't a wall he was standing in front of. It was a door. There wasn't anything special about its appearance. It was a simple, white door. The doors in the rest of the house looked exactly the same as this one. In my mind, I thought this meant I had more closet space than I thought, or maybe even a full pantry. Feeling some of the excitement I'd carried with me through the beginning of the tour, I turned back to Murray, who was watching me closely from beside the door. Then he spoke in a calm, friendly voice very unlike the tone he'd favored during the rest of our short conversations. "Well, technically there's one more room in the house, the basement," he said with a small nod to the door he had been leaning against. Before I could respond or react, Murray barreled on. "But I've been using the space as storage for a lot of my own crap through the years. The door stays locked, and the only key is mine. I hope you aren't offended, but I just don't want you messing around down there in all the old junk. I haven't kept it real organized, and I worry someone else might stumble and hurt themselves. You understand?" It seemed like a reasonable explanation, but my lizard brain was abuzz with the instinct to run from the house. Thoughts of crazy landlords keeping tenants as sex slaves in their secret basement dungeons played out in my mind. My poker face being crap, Murray must have seen the worry on my face. With a convincing laugh, he put his hands up in the air like he was surrendering himself. "I know what you're thinking. Who is this guy and what awful thing is going on in his basement that he doesn't want me to know about?" We both laughed a little. I didn't feel much like laughing, but it cut the tension a bit. He continued on. "I swear it's nothing like that. We can take a look if you want." He took his keys out of his back pocket and selected the necessary key. Again, he looked at me with raised eyebrows and furrowed brow, waiting for a response. After a second of hesitation, and a few more murder scenarios playing in my brain, I blinked and answered the man, "Why not?" The basement was very much just a basement. A concrete floor with shelves and boxes galore. Murray hadn't lied about the abundance of junk down there. He had to climb over several piles of it to reach the solitary light bulb that hung from the ceiling at the center of the room. Satisfied, I told Murray we could head back up. Back in the kitchen, Murray closed and locked the door once again, returning his key to his pocket. Turning to me, he spoke again with the nonchalance and dismissal. "See, nothing crazy at all. Just a lot of stuff someone could trip over. So do me a favor, huh? Don't worry about getting in here. Not without me." Looking to end what was starting to feel like a very strange encounter, I nodded quickly. This apparently wouldn't suffice. Murray spoke again with harshness in his voice. "I need you to say it. You will not try to go down there without me. You will leave it be." I stared at him for a moment, not exactly trying to hide the puzzlement on my face. He raised his eyebrows at me again, but the tiredness in his eyes had been replaced with clear focus now. My blood turned to ice in that gaze. I eagerly answered, "Of course, I'll stay in my areas up here. I promise not to mess with the basement at all without you here." Murray held his cold gaze on me for another swollen moment, before apparently deciding that my answer was acceptable. The tour was completed, and I hastily left the house, trying to focus on how good it would be to have my own place and a fresh start. All the while, that icy stare the older man had held me in made me jittery the entire drive home. Later that week, the papers were finalized, and I had my keys. Gathering up some friends, I got moved in with relative ease, and all was right with the world. My buddies stayed over for a while once we were done to enjoy a well-deserved feast of pizza and beer. It was such a relief to just hang out and be happy in my new home, filling it up with warmth and light. As it got later, my friends began to head for home one by one. When the last one had left, I locked the front door, turned and rested my back against it. I looked up at the house and smiled wide. It's gonna be good, I said out loud to myself and the house. I turned towards my bedroom to hit the hay myself. 3 loud knocks came from somewhere in the house. Knock, knock, knock. Frozen in place, I perked my ears, half convinced I had imagined the sound. The silence stretched out forever, and a quiet ringing bloomed in my ears. I let out my breath, trying to replace my sense of calm with oxygen. I began to move towards my room again. Knock, knock, knock. I whipped around. My heartbeat hammered in my ears like an echo of the knocking sound. This time, it was clear where the noise was coming from. The kitchen. Painfully aware of each sound I made, I inched my way back down the hall, through the living room, and into the kitchen. I flipped the light switch and was greeted by that ominous white door on the side of the room. It was sitting there waiting for me like it had invited me in for some coffee. In that moment, I couldn't make my feet move forward anymore, and I just stared at the door waiting for another knocking noise to come, and my sanity to go. I counted the seconds, then the minutes. 5 minutes went by with me standing stock still in my own kitchen, staring at the locked basement door. After 10 minutes, I was convinced I'd had a few too many, and was content to end the night with a few more, in a night of drunken sleep. Laughing a little, I reached in the fridge and grabbed a couple more beers. I walked back to the kitchen entrance, and looked back at the basement door. It still looked like it was waiting for me there. I shook the thought off, and flipped the light switch off. A thin line of yellow light was leaking through the crack at the bottom of the basement door. I stared at it. There was no way it was real. Or maybe Murray had left the light on, but I hadn't seen the light before I hit the kitchen light switch walking in. It couldn't have been real. That's what I kept thinking. Reaching up, I hit the kitchen light switch again, and there was the basement door, stark white and almost smiling at me. Did you see? Are you sure you saw what you saw? Come a little closer. Take another look. My hand was shaking on the light switch now, and I could feel my eyes bulging in their sockets. Slowly, I took a deep breath and let out a little shudder. I would turn the lights off, and there would be nothing. It was fine. I was fine. With a click, the kitchen lights went dark once more. What I saw then sent me scrambling back down the hall into my room, and I did not leave until the sun had returned the following morning. The yellow light still seeped out from under the door, broken only by the unmistakable shadow of 2 feet. Knock, knock, knock. I used to be a reality hacker, and no, it's not what you think. I don't have some kind of supernatural or metaphysical powers. I just exploited real life the way a hacker would exploit electronics or computer systems. Just like a computer hacker wanders the dark web in search of information or restricted corporate systems, I would traverse the city looking for shortcuts through infrastructure, or in search of things no one else knew about. I don't really like the term though. Even if the parallel I just explained makes sense, I just don't understand why they have to call it something stupid like reality hacking. I prefer suburban spelunking, myself. I think the comparison to actual spelunking is more accurate, and it's a fun word to say. My best friend AJ and I would explore all the little nooks, corners, and crannies most people don't even know exist. Drains, abandoned buildings, closed subway tunnels. We hacked things like that. We bent or broke the rules for curiosity's sake, and our own amusement. Do you remember that old bootlegger's hideout that was discovered last year in the city subway system? AJ and I found it while exploring an old tunnel. Of course, we didn't get credit for the find. We couldn't. We weren't supposed to be there in the first place, and sure as hell weren't going to let any authorities know that we did. Instead, I told my buddy Jerry, who works for the Public Works Department, about it. He ended up on the local news, and got some kind of award from the local historic association. We didn't mind. For us, the thrill was in the find. I remember when we first got into the place how excited we were. The place was really dusty, a clear sign that no one had been there for years and years. We found out something everyone forgot, or never knew existed in the first place. We never found anything like that again, but the rush of the unexplored, or the thrill of the unknown, kept me exploring all throughout high school and college. AJ and I spent the summer after our freshman year at the community college exploring the city's storm drains. We had a lot of fun doing it. If you don't mind a little humidity and the occasional bad smell, you could get across town without worrying about traffic or pedestrians. Sure, we could always drive like regular people. We both had cars, but traffic can get pretty bad in our city. A good shortcut could come in handy sometimes. One day in the middle of August, we went to a park across town for a pickup game of football. It was late in the afternoon, and traffic was bumper to bumper, so we took a shortcut through one of the drains on our way home. We made good time, and cut a few blocks out of our trip. To tell the truth, we were a little smug about our subterranean shortcuts. Who else can get across town as quick as we could, without awkward hops over fences and through backyards? Most drains are either simple tubes that force you to hunch over as you walk, or they're larger corridor-like tunnels, with raised ledges for walking. The one we took was a tube. Normally I don't enjoy those, but this one was not very long, so I put up with it. The last rain was weeks ago, and the drain was pretty dry, making for an easy go of it. Our footsteps and banter echoed down the circular tunnel, and the cool underground air felt refreshing after the heat. Our route more or less ran a straight line that cut through a large hill. It connected to the main drain system at a single point near the entrance, by the park where we played football. So imagine my surprise when we ran across a fork in the drain we both could have sworn wasn't there last time. We stood there looking at it for a long time. Finally, AJ spoke. I didn't know this was here. Me neither, I said. How could we have missed this last time? Neither of us are fools. Whenever we explored, we always tried to find out as much as we could about where we went. Also, we always let people know where we were going. Research the location before physically checking it out, bringing plenty of lights, survival equipment, and stuff like that. Urban spelunking can get dangerous. That's why we didn't just charge headlong down the new tunnel. We did what we always did. We went home and investigated. After getting back to my place, we did some digging on the internet, but the tunnel wasn't on any of the city's maintenance maps, or in any public works record we could find. I called my friend Jerry from the city public works department, but he didn't seem to know about it.
No, there's no branching drain off that one,
Jerry said.
Are you sure you were where you thought you were?
Yeah, man, I'm sure. I'm telling you, there's another drain down there, I said.
Well, I'm off for the next couple days. Going fishing up north. You gonna check it out?
Probably this weekend, yeah, I answered.
Alright. I'll tell Bob you'll be down there just in case you get in trouble.
Jerry said, and after a few pleasantries, we hung up. Try as we might, neither AJ or I could find anything out about this tunnel, but we did figure out a few things. First, we were pretty sure it wasn't in use. The city had an older drain system that it no longer used, and we figured this new one was a part of it. We ventured a little way down the new route when we first found it, just to see if it was a tunnel or a room of some kind. AJ noticed that the connection was pretty rough, not smooth like a connecting tunnel. Most of the tube-style tunnels are modular, like PVC pipes. They don't cut the drain tubes to make a connection. They use prefab joints. The connection from the main drain seemed like it was cut, and then connected to the old one. Another thing that caught our attention was the lack of any kind of moisture. Most drains show at least a little evidence of dampness. Even just dried leaves or debris, but this one was dry. That confirmed for us that this drain was part of the old system, so we decided to explore it. Before we ventured down the tunnel, we took all our usual precautions and a few more. We brought materials to map the place. chem lights to mark intersections, a GPS, and we let some friends know what we were doing, and when we planned to come back. Sure, my backpack was heavier than usual, but better to play things safe, considering we planned to venture into an unknown tunnel. It didn't take long for us to get to the access points, and while we walked to the intersection with the new tunnel, I found myself getting excited. I kept thinking back to the bootlegger's hideout we found. Would we stumble upon something like that again? We might even be able to take credit for it this time. That would be something. I was lost in those thoughts, and didn't realize that AJ had stopped walking. I bumped into him and he swore. "Dude, really?" he asked in a feigned outrage. "Sorry, man," I said, shrugging. "Just be a little more careful when we go in," AJ said, pointing down the new tunnel. I was apparently so lost in thought that I didn't realize we had arrived. We stopped to check our gear and then made our way in. AJ went first and I followed. When we started walking, we kept count of the number of steps we took. We knew from experience how many feet 100 paces would take us, what orienteering enthusiasts call a pace count. That helped us construct a fairly accurate map. We knew where the new tunnel branched off from the old one, how many steps it took us to walk a certain section, and in which cardinal direction each turn led. We could even do the walking hunched over in a cramped space like this one. So even after a few twists and turns, we were still pretty confident of our location, despite having walked for about an hour. We decided to take a break and check our position, even though we felt pretty sure about our navigation skills. We were making a crude map based on our pace counts, and compared it to a city public works map. I guesstimated that we were near the slums, probably under Lake Street. We decided to check the first manhole we found to verify our position. I was also getting tired and a little sore from walking through the cramped space, and needed to stretch. To our great satisfaction, we popped up onto Lake Street. Lake and Union, to be exact. That was a little odd, not because we were lost. We were actually right on the money, but because according to the public works map, no access joints existed here. Still, we didn't question that, even if it seemed odd at the time. We were more surprised at what was on the street than a manhole that someone neglected mapping. Lake Street used to be nice a couple decades ago. Big houses lined either side, mostly run down and abandoned. These houses were close to a century old and dated back to the early days of the city, but gradually fell out of style as the years went on. Even in its dilapidated state, the neighborhood was still impressive. Most of the houses were at least 3 stories tall, in an old Victorian style. I would have felt nostalgic for simpler times if the whole thing wasn't so unexpected. I remember the house right in front of the manhole from which we exited was particularly impressive. I knew that some big houses still stood on the streets, but this one was enormous. It was a 4-story monstrosity of an old-fashioned mansion. Most of the windows were boarded up, and the yard was overgrown, but it was clearly a nice place upon a time. The sun was getting low, and the late afternoon shadows obscured many of the house's details, but that also helped hide the blemishes of decay. "Dude," AJ said after a few moments. "I had no idea this was here." "Me neither," I replied. "I thought we knew about all the big houses around here." "Apparently not." AJ turned toward me. "Want to check it out?" "What? Now?" I said incredulously. "We don't even know if it's structurally sound." AJ gave me a look which people reserve only for valley girls, old ladies at church, and lame practical jokers. "I don't want to go inside, dum-dum," he laughed. "Let's just walk around outside and see if there's anything interesting." "Okay," I answered slowly. Walking around the outside couldn't hurt, I guess. I just wasn't sure why AJ wanted to leave an unexplored tunnel behind. As if reading my mind, he spoke again. "We spent most of summer underground, man. Let's enjoy some fresh air. We won't go inside, just walk the grounds and see if we can find out anything about it that way. We can always pick up the drains tomorrow." I thought for a few seconds. I didn't see any fault with his logic, and some fresh air did sound good. "Okay," I said. "I'm game. I just don't want to hang out here forever. It's almost dinner time and I'm pretty hungry." I patted my stomach to emphasize the point, and AJ laughed. "Yeah, me too. We can hit up a burger joint on the way back. Let's go." With that, we set off. Finding a way into the yard wasn't hard since the fence was broken in many places. We didn't even have to jump it. Walking through the tall grass wasn't easy though. I made a mental note to check myself for ticks when I got home. Circling around the house didn't get us much in the way of results though. The side was just as boarded up as the front. No discernible way in or out caught our eyes. Not until we made our way to the backyard, and suddenly the ground gave way beneath us. One moment we were walking through tall grass, and the next, our world dissolved into a torrent of dirt, broken wood, and gravity. Before we knew it, we found ourselves in some sort of cellar. We lay there in a daze for a minute or so, shocked by what happened. AJ groaned and sat up. I coughed and sputtered a bit. Apparently I got a mouthful of dirt on the way down. I guess I was too surprised to notice. "What the hell?" AJ asked. "You okay?" I said, sitting up myself. "I think so." He answered. AJ stood up and brushed himself off. "Nothing is broken." I looked up as we saw the hole through which we fell. It was pretty high above us, too high to reach. Broken plywood framed the edges of the hole. It was probably fairly rotten, and gave way as we put some pressure on it. "AJ, that's a long way up, man. I don't think we're getting back up that way," I said. AJ swore. "Yeah, I think you're right." I looked around, but I couldn't see much in the limited light from the ceiling. I took off my backpack, dug inside it for a few seconds, and pulled out my flashlight. I turned it on and shined it around the room. It seemed to be a cellar typical for a house as old as this one, albeit deeper than usual. I saw a door at one end. AJ saw it too. "Only one way out, huh?" he said. I nodded and got up. We checked our gear, grabbed an extra light, and walked over to the door. It didn't seem like it was locked when I tested the knob, but an inexplicable feeling of dread came over me when I touched it. My skin prickled goose flesh, which caused me to shudder and jerk back my hand. The door opened. We both jumped at that. I was pretty sure that I hadn't turned the knob, or even got my whole hand around it, but it opened anyways. We didn't lose our heads, despite the surprise of the suddenly openness for AJ and I. We moved to opposite sides of the door so that whatever had opened the door couldn't see us. "Hello?" I called after a few minutes. "Is anyone there?" Nothing but silence answered me. I looked at AJ and he shrugged. I frowned, but I didn't say anything. We moved in front of the door and shined our flashlights in. It looked like the perfect man cave from the late 80s. A pool table sat immediately in front of us, and on the opposite wall was a large screen TV. That would have been top of the line sometime around 1985. Posters of action movies like Die Hard, The Terminator, and Predator beckoned the wood-paneled walls, along with some pro sports players like Larry Bird or Wayne Gretzky, and old swimsuit issues of Farrah Fawcett and Kathy Ireland. A couple cases of sports memorabilia stood against the left wall, interspersed with the images of late 20th century testosterone, and a bar was on the right side of the room. Dust covered everything, even the carpet. Dim light filtered through gaps in the boards covering the windows. We fanned out. AJ went to look at the display cases and I examined the pool table. Near the pool table was an autographed poster of the NFL player William Perry. I remembered the poster from when I was a kid, because my older brother had one on his wall. Perry, nicknamed the Fridge, was smiling and leaning against the refrigerator, but in this one his face was fixed into a snarl. His eyes seemed to be looking directly into mine, and I had the distinct impression that expression of hate was for me. I blinked and the Fridge was back to the smiling football player that I remembered, and not the hate-twisted visage I could have sworn was glaring at me a moment ago. I glanced over at AJ to see if he saw what I did, but he was crouched in front of a case of sports memorabilia. I gave the poster one more glance, and then made my way over to AJ. As I walked to the case, AJ straightened up and said out loud, "Dude, what the hell?" He turned to look at me, and pointed to the bottom shelf. I bent over to see what he was talking about. Right in the middle of the bottom shelf sat the strangest figurine I had ever seen. It was two people laying on the ground with their stomachs ripped open, and their entrails strewn about around them. The really weird part is that they looked exactly like us. "What the hell?" I said. "Yeah, man," AJ said. "This is really weird. How the hell did these get here? This makes no sense, dude." "We need to get out of here," AJ said. "Now." "Yeah," I said. "Let's go." We moved with more than a little urgency to the door through which we came in, but out of shock it seemed to be locked. Again. Another door sat on the far side of the basement, and we made a beeline for it. AJ wrenched it open. We could see stairs leading up into the darkness. AJ stared up at the stairs and I started to follow. Before I even climbed one step, I felt something touch my hair. The touch was so light that I could have imagined it. In fact, I thought I did. Until I felt breathing on my neck and heard faint whispering words that I couldn't quite make out. I don't remember exactly what happened next, but I found myself at the top of the stairs. I must have sprinted up to the next floor so quickly that I didn't realize it. I could hear footsteps following me, and I thought I heard AJ call out, "Hey man!" I wrenched the door open, and then stopped dead. I was back in the basement, standing just inside the door we came through when we first entered the room. The only difference was that no light was coming through the windows now. The only illumination came from my flashlight. A sudden noise made me jump and drop my flashlight. The door behind me slammed shut. The flashlight rolled away from me towards the center of the room, throwing crazily spinning shadows all over the place. I moved forward to retrieve it, but a sudden motion made me freeze. Something was moving around outside the light. Scuffling sounds came from the other side of the pool table. I peered at the table, trying to make out the shape in the limited light. I was already on edge, and my fight-or-flight instinct was starting to kick into gear. Then, something grabbed my leg. I didn't wait to see what it was. I just bolted. No flashlight, no plan. Just getting the hell out. I reached the stairs and took them two at a time. I crashed through the door and found myself, thankfully, in another room. I looked around and saw that I was in some sort of space between a kitchen and living room. The kitchen was on my left, and the living room to my right. A large sliding door was on the wall in front of me, and a little bit of the evening light leaked through from where the boards that covered it didn't sit flush. Everything was covered with the same dust as the basement. Something was wrong though. I couldn't put my finger on it, and then suddenly, it dawned on me. I could hear whispering. I didn't notice at first because my heart was racing, and I was breathing heavy. But now that I was starting to catch my breath, I could hear it. Faint whispers, like the ones I heard at the bottom of the stairs, seemed to be coming from the living room. I was already on edge, almost panicking, and that sent me over. I blindly rushed in the other direction, and saw AJ just ahead of me. He looked like he was leaving the kitchen through an archway on the far side of the room. I started following him and then jumped when I suddenly heard footsteps pounding up the stairs. I leapt through the archway, and came into some sort of living room or sitting room, dodging indistinct blobs in the dark. I tried to keep up with the dim shape of AJ ahead of me. The room was darker than the kitchen. I had to slow down to avoid crashing into something in the dark, even though the sound of footsteps behind me was getting louder. Even if it was a squatter or some crazy old resident who never left the place, every instinct I had told me that I did not want to meet whoever was behind me in this house. Illumination from streetlights suddenly filled the room. AJ had managed to wrench open an exterior door, and the light illuminated the room enough for me to see my way. He stood silhouetted against the bright frame of the door for a second, and then disappeared outside. I sprinted for the door, and did not stop until I was outside. I dashed across the large porch, to the steps and into the yard. AJ stood there, bent over and breathing heavy. "Holy shit, man," I said, panting. "That was close." "Yeah," he answered, his voice strangely flat. "Close." I was about to ask him if he was okay when a voice from behind me cut me off. "Dude, what the hell? Why didn't you wait for me?" I knew that voice. It was AJ's. But AJ stood in front of me, gasping for air after a mad dash out of the house, into which we accidentally fell. How could he be behind me? I turned to look, afraid of what I might see. My stomach sank and a cold feeling of dread settled over me as I saw what was behind me. It was AJ. He was walking down the steps with a concerned look on his face. "Dude," the second AJ said. "Who's that?" The first AJ stood up. They both looked at each other, a curious expression on their faces that quickly changed into horror. I looked at both of them and then back at the house. It stood silent and dark in the night, as though no one had even bothered it. No one spoke.